Do you believe in fate? What about karma? Do you think that if you endure, everything will be good for you? The Eunkyum is a corporate enslaved and semi-closet gay who has only dated good-for-nothings or complete trashes. And when he had just gotten out of his most recent toxic relationship, the new team manager was making a move on him. Or does he? The new manager Han Jihyuk is the classmate he rejected years ago and seems out to get him now. Jihyuk's face is Eunkyum's type, though. Is he going to be alright? Our story starts with our MC chancing to meet the eyes of a good-looking man at the train station. To him, it was love at first sight. Well, he did try to approach the man. Not the shy type, I see. Unfortunately, before he could, some randa grabbed onto him. This made our MC miss his chance to approach the man and cut his train. The old lady even tried to pull him somewhere, spouting nonsense about a family member's health condition. Well, she's a scammer or cultist of some sort. Later that day, our MC was at his office desk. He was lamenting the missed chance of getting the man's phone number, especially since he was his type. So, does he only judge a potential lover by their face? Well, anyway, our MC's office mates, however, thought that Eunkyum was depressed due to almost getting late because of the old lady who grabbed onto him. Turns out, getting pulled to participate in surveys and being recruited to suspicious cults is a common occurrence for him. Is it because he looks gullible? That's still scary, though. The conversation turned into Eunkyum bragging that it's just because he's generally popular. Even back in high school, girls would flock to him for attention. After being scolded by their female co-worker for fooling around, who is not affected by his supposed charms, Eunkyum's friends left him on his own again. It turns out his brags were mostly lies since he likes men. Then again, he was still quite popular back then, so it's not a complete lie. During lunch break that day, Eunkyum and his co-workers discussed the newly promoted team manager joining their team. It seems he's the same age as Eunkyum, who's already a year at the company. After learning these basic facts about the new manager, they all silently agreed that it would be intense working under him, having already achieved that promotion at his age. He must be a competent and diligent employee, a perfectionist if I may, and those types usually expect a lot from the people they lead. Suddenly, Eunkyum received a message on his phone. After reading, it somehow made him depressed. He then quickly excused himself to go back first, and although he claimed that the text was just from a friend, his co-workers guessed it was from his lover, and they were right. The message Eunkyum received wasn't something that one should get from someone they're seeing. The sender was asking to borrow money from Eunkyum, but the fact is, the other guy hadn't returned the money he had borrowed previously yet. Eunkyum couldn't help but get upset that it always seemed to happen to him too. She judges people by their faces, is gullible, and tolerates being used. I'm honestly starting to get worried for this MC, and we're still at chapter 1. When Eunkyum got home that night, the shameless lover was already waiting for him there. He welcomed Eunkyum with a hug and thanked him for the money wired to his account earlier that day. The dude even dared to make excuses that the money was for his father's major surgery and whatnot, and Eunkyum just dutifully asked for his father's condition. Wow, toxic relationship all the way. Even though the shameless dude claimed he'd pay him back soon, Eunkyum knew it was all a lie. After all, it's already been the third time something like this has happened, and most probably, the bare-faced bastard hadn't paid any of the previous ones either. Eunkyum already accepted that he only seemed to attract men who were either good for nothing or complete trash. He's not happy with it, of course, but it's a reality he unwillingly lived with. One thing he couldn't forgive, however, is cheating, and Eunkyum feels that the dude is cheating on him. His instinct had never been wrong before, so he made up his mind that he should get out of the relationship before it's too late. When Eunkyum got to work the next day, he was surprised to see the man he saw at the subway the previous day there. The first thing that Eunkyum thought about when he got face to face with the man was that he had finally met the man of his dreams. This MC is not any better than his shameless lover, is he? Anyway, Eunkyum seems like he's undoubtedly unlucky with men, though. The man of his dreams was the new manager they had discussed previously, and he's a nitpicky prick who just couldn't be satisfied with anything Eunkyum does. Even their other co-workers noticed how the new manager was giving our MC a hard time. It's to the point of Eunkyum wanting to kill the prick or quit his job. The new manager's name is Han Jihyuk. Tall, dark, and handsome. He's someone who probably overworked a lot to get to the position he is currently in. And he's also why Eunkyum hasn't slept enough for a week after having countless proposals of his get scrapped by Jihyuk. It was no wonder that Eunkyum was boiling with anger. And yet, with just a smile from the new manager, all of Eunkyum's anger seemed to melt away. Geez, no wonder he always gets scammed by no good shameless bastards. Eunkyum is someone who only really cares about handsome faces. Suppose a man who approaches him is good looking. He'll get into a relationship with them, even if they are manipulative money-sucking jerks. And right now, Eunkyum is attracted to Jihyuk's handsome face. So, instead of just getting angry at Jihyuk, Eunkyum decided that he'll get his revenge someday. However, it doesn't look like it's going to be easy. It was already past office hours, and Eunkyum's co-workers went home. But he couldn't do the same just yet due to the tasks given to him by Jihyuk. Even Eunkyum could feel that the new manager looked like he was out to get him, as Eunkyum hoped it was just his imagination. He couldn't help nodding into sleep. The next thing he knew, he was already being woken up by Jihyuk in such proximity that he couldn't help but turn red in the face. Jihyuk asked Eunkyum if he still hadn't gone home of the tasks he had assigned. Well, duh. When Eunkyum said he was almost done, Jihyuk told him he'd finish it himself. And so, he noted Eunkyum to go home for the day. He showed concern by pointing out how he must be tired from working so late into the night. The weak-willed, easily swayed simpleton, who is, unfortunately, the MC of this manhwa, is whipped. Just by acting a little nice, Jihyuk made Eunkyum's heart flutter, and Eunkyum couldn't help thinking about his conflicted feelings for Jihyuk. Although when he finally pulled himself together, he was only to start cursing at Eunkyum's shameless lover. The dude hadn't contacted him much after he was lent the money. Despite Jihyuk's nice gesture the previous night, it seemed like nothing had changed, allowing Jihyuk still nitpicks on Eunkyum's work, and Eunkyum had to accept the criticisms with a smile plastered unwillingly, once again questioning his sanity for falling for Jihyuk. Eunkyum felt so frustrated at Jihyuk that day that he went on drinking with his co-workers. He got so drunk that he couldn't walk by himself anymore. After leaving the drinking place, his colleagues persuaded him to go home, which he refused drunkenly. Despite his state, he still saw him. Eunkyum saw his shameless lover, who looked like he was having a good time with his wife and daughter, which once again proves how lucky Eunkyum is with men and relationships. Wow, the scumbag is a complete package. At work the next day, Eunkyum was zoned out thinking about that shameless ex of his. He kept replaying in his head the events that happened the previous night when their eyes met. Eunkyum was brought back from his musings by one of his co-workers. It was time for their lunch break, but Eunkyum told him that he was not feeling good and won't be joining them. The co-worker was worried that it could be because of a hangover from last night and offered Eunkyum to get him a drink. But Eunkyum insisted otherwise and just sent him away. After he was alone once again, Eunkyum was seething as he thought of that piece of shit. Well, he should have known earlier. After all, the dude just kept on asking for money, and they only contacted him when he needed something from Eunkyum. The worst part is that Eunkyum became the other woman, in this case, the other man, whom the scumbag had been cheating with on his wife. Still, Eunkyum is also partly to blame for letting the scumbag take advantage of him like that. That doesn't change the fact that the dude deserves divine punishment. Eunkyum even went online to ask for advice on what to do with his situation. I'm guessing Reddit. The support was flooding, although most suggested that Eunkyum just kill the scumbag, which he seriously considered, and in the most brutal way. His savage musings were once again interrupted. This time, however, it was Jihyuk. He also asked Eunkyum about lunch. However, Eunkyum tried to refuse at first when Jihyuk asked. The new manager started to get touchy-feely. Not that Eunkyum is minded, but the thing that sold Eunkyum was Jihyuk's smile. With that one gesture, our pathetic MC had a 180-degree mood change. He even offered to show Jihyuk around as he became a chatterbox. The next thing he knew, they were already seated in some restaurant. He once again lamented how he let Jihyuk lure him, and he has no one else to blame but himself. On the outside, the two are having an innocent and pleasant conversation. In his head, however, Eunkyum only has complaints for Jihyuk. Is he related to Sakura or something? Eunkyum smiles pleasantly on the outside but is full of contempt deep inside, especially when Jihyuk starts commenting about Eunkyum's performance at work. Changing the topic, Jihyuk asked Eunkyum if they had met before, since Eunkyum seemed familiar to him. Taken aback, Eunkyum thought that Jihyuk was talking about that time at the subway when they appeared to have met each other's gaze. Feeling self-conscious, Eunkyum tried to deny it, only for Jihyuk to express his disappointment as Jihyuk claimed that he felt hopeful that they did. The comment again made Eunkyum overthink, and he was again zoned out for the rest of the day. At night, Eunkyum concluded that Jihyuk was interested in him, and he's giving Eunkyum such a hard time at work because he's acting like a little kid. Dude, whatever makes you sleep at night. Patting himself at the back for not losing his touch, Eunkyum swore he'd make Jihyuk admit it. On the days that followed that lunch date, Eunkyum tried approaching Jihyuk more often, whether it's to offer some drink, candy, or even supplements. Eunkyum even showed improvement in his work performance. When Jihyuk said that he enjoyed Eunkyum's attention to him in the past few days, Eunkyum became more certain of his assumption about Jihyuk's feelings for him, and it was something that he didn't hesitate to share with his close friends. But all his friends seemed like they'd already had enough of Eunkyum's tendency to overthink things, and they didn't hold back in criticizing him about his choices in men. Not to mention that Eunkyum seemed to be trying to enter another relationship when he just got out of a toxic one. One even tried telling him he should be careful about getting involved with someone from work. Eunkyum admits that dating a co-worker is indeed dangerous, but he still couldn't help it because this co-worker was hot. If this idiot had been my friend, I would have smacked his head so hard it'll leave a bump. But since I'm not, I'll give me a bombastic side eye. I have no more words. But clearly, his most vocal friend does. She criticized him for having such a messed up radar. Eunkyum never seems to like guys who like him. And yet he doesn't hesitate to chase after those who only take him for granted. She even reminded him about the guy who confessed to Eunkyum in high school, of whom Eunkyum rejected just because of his short stature, saying that looks is important to him and the guy didn't cut it. Again, I have no more words. In Eunkyum's defense, he can't date guys he's not into. Although there's always the option of not dating, it doesn't seem like it's in Eunkyum's vocabulary, which is exactly why his friends are so done with his love life problems. It couldn't bother them since he never listens to them anyway. Although his friends seem apathetic towards Eunkyum, they do worry about him. They understand that he's probably just looking for someone for support. After all, he hadn't had anyone to lean on since his parents died. After dinner with his friends, Eunkyum went to his grandmother's house, where his younger brother welcomed him. Although what the kid looked forward to is the ice cream that Eunkyum bought for his younger sibling. It's adorable how these kids had their priorities straight. Eunkyum wanted to live with his grandmother and siblings, but since the house was far from work, he had no choice but to live alone and only went home during weekends, the only time he must spend with them, like playing soccer. Before sleeping on his bed that night, Eunkyum's last thoughts were that of manager Han Jihyuk. The next morning, Eunkyum immediately tried to go back to sleep when he woke up and realized it was the weekend. But his younger brother had different ideas. The little rascal suddenly jumped on his older brother's sleeping bag, trying to wake him up so they can play soccer that Eunkyum promised them the night before. To get his revenge, Eunkyum tickled and attacked his younger brother. That was when his little sister came to call them for breakfast. One can see how Eunkyum's family is important to him by how he treats them, and how close he is to them despite living away most of the time. Not long after, the three of them headed for the soccer field in their jerseys. Eunkyum had at first bragged how he wouldn't go easy on them because they were young, but in the end, he never managed to defend against their attacks. Since he's useless against sports in the first place, he would have had a good excuse if the kids were the sporty type. Unfortunately, they're kids with a healthy relationship with video games and the internet, proving his inadequacy. Probably already feeling bored playing with a hopeless brother, the adorable little sister started asking for ice cream from the convenience store. Eunkyum initially tried to refuse, but who could resist such lovely begging faces? In the convenience store, Eunkyum lamented his hopelessness against the whims of his siblings. It's an unforgiving reality. Every older sibling has suffered at least once. That was when someone suddenly called his name. Eunkyum was surprised when that someone turned out to be Jihyuk, who filled his thoughts before falling asleep last night. Jihyuk's parents live around the area, and he came to visit them. Based on his siblings' reactions when they saw Jihyuk, one couldn't deny that they are indeed related to Eunkyum. It seems like love at first sight for them as well. Isn't that nice? He's already got the approval even before something even started. As soon as Jihyuk left, the siblings noticed how their older brother's face had turned red, to which Eunkyum brushed it off as him coming down with a cold. Of course, those were just excuses. He remembered his friend's words about choosing not to date anyone the night before. But it is impossible for a hopeless romantic like him after all. And what's more, the apple of his eye seemed to have noticed that he was also interested in him. And I'm having secondhand embarrassment just looking at them. Back at work, Eunkyum started being cautious whenever he entered their office. Even though he was all over him just a few days ago, Eunkyum is now desperately hiding from Jihyuk. And it was because he realized that instead of Jihyuk confessing to him, he first deluded himself into thinking Eunkyum feels he'll be the one who will desperately profess his love. However, hiding under his desk to avoid Jihyuk seemed to have backfired when he suddenly stood up and bumped his head under it. It was so loud that some of the other co-workers heard. It would have been fine if that was the end of it, but Eunkyum seems to have rotten luck. It turns out Jihyuk also listened to the commotion and even went to check if Eunkyum was fine. He was being touchy-feely yet again, making Eunkyum self-conscious yet again. Eunkyum was embarrassed, but it doesn't change that his narcissistic self still deludes himself of Jihyuk's affection for him. That doesn't mean he'll stop avoiding him, though. But as mentioned earlier, the simpleton had rotten luck. A familiar voice had called out to Eunkyum just as he was about to leave the company. And you guessed it, it was Jihyuk inside his car, offering Eunkyum a ride home. Eunkyum, of course, tried to refuse at first, but the manager was so smooth in guilt-tripping our simpleton MC that it was useless. The ride was silent, first, until Jihyuk suddenly commented how Eunkyum looked like he had something to say to him. Embarrassed for being caught, Eunkyum tried to turn the table. He asked Jihyuk in return if he had something to tell Eunkyum himself. Jihyuk admitted that there was something he'd meant to tell him. He still thinks the manager is really into him. He's about to get a confession. Eunkyum didn't hold back confessing that he liked Jihyuk. However, Jihyuk's confession doesn't sound like what Eunkyum expected. It turns out, Jihyuk and Eunkyum went to the same school before. We now go on a trip on Jihyuk's memory lane. He was so popular with the girls back in college due to his height. Some even assumed he was popular back in high school as well. However, they got it all wrong. When Jihyuk was in high school, he was short with a twig-like body. He also wore thick glasses that made his eyes look small. He was the intellectual, quiet type, spending weekends with his classmates at the library. Jihyuk's days back then were normal, and he never stood out, nor did he want to stand out. But even he had someone he liked back then, our very own Eunkyum. At first, Jihyuk was content watching him. However, fearing that he'll be forgotten after graduation, he confessed to Eunkyum, only to be rejected for such a shallow reason of being tiny. Because, according to Eunkyum, looks are important to him. Given that his confession was half-assed, to begin with, Jihyuk was still upset that his first love failed. Jihyuk's life had a drastic change after high school, however. Not only did he stop wearing his glasses, but he also had a growth spurt, which made him popular anywhere he went. Even then, he still seemed to can't forget his first love. Who would have thought they'd have such an unexpected reunion years later? It turns out, Jihyuk immediately recognized Eunkyum when they first met each other's eyes at the subway. Although it doesn't look like Eunkyum did. Still, it was obvious that Eunkyum was interested in him now. And for what it's worth, Jihyuk found Eunkyum's reactions cute and funny. This brings us back to the present, where he finally lets it out. Curious as to how Eunkyum will react when he finds out who Jihyuk is. Eunkyum was, of course, taken aback by what Jihyuk said, blaming it on poor memory for not recognizing Jihyuk, since he looked like he'd been popular back then. Well, Jihyuk humored him, although Eunkyum still felt like there was more than Jihyuk was letting on. When they finally arrived at Eunkyum's destination, he thanked Jihyuk for the ride and got off. Before sending Jihyuk on his way, Eunkyum told him he could forget his confession if it made Jihyuk uncomfortable. He probably felt like it was the perfect time to get back at Eunkyum. Jihyuk rejected him by saying that looks are important to him. Jihyuk's parting words seemed to affect Eunkyum more than the rejection itself. They were making him remember something. Dreading for the possibility, he went straight to his friend's place, who also happened to be one of his classmates in high school. Eunkyum desperately asked for their high school yearbook. He was promptly looking for Jihyuk's name. And Tada did turn out to be that guy who confessed to him back then. The one he rejected for being tiny because, for Eunkyum, looks are important. Well, karma's a nasty bitch. Realizing how all this new information could affect him, Eunkyum was once again a drama queen. His good friend Hae-jun had no choice but to become his sole designated caretaker for the night. Even then, Hae-jun still couldn't stand Eunkyum's drama and told him to either pull himself together and sleep or leave his place. However, Eunkyum is so stressed that sleep isn't an option. He even resorted to smoking again, which he promised to stop for the sake of his siblings. Eunkyum was bombarded by his rationality, instinct, and intense self-reflection. All three were giving their unsolicited opinions on Eunkyum's dilemma, and he had no words to defend himself against himself. Welcome to adulting. The worst part of it all, however, is that he got rejected. The next day, he went to work while in the first acceptance stage, denial. So, what if he rejected Jihyuk years ago? What could Jihyuk possibly do about it now? Well, Eunkyum quickly found out the possibilities. Starting with the meeting they had that day, Eunkyum was distracted during their meeting, seriously thinking about what Jihyuk was pinning for when he brought up their awkward history. Jumping onto the second stage of acceptance and anger, Eunkyum started getting frustrated over his rejection and trying to justify what had happened in their younger days as something out of immaturity, and that he's something which had the looks, so there was no way that Jihyuk's reason for rejecting him was valid. He probably realizes what Eunkyum was distracted over and that he wants to mess with him. Jihyuk volunteered Eunkyum to organize a client list of 300 before the next day's meeting, something that even non-corporate employees would know is an impossible task, which is why it stunned everyone present in the meeting room. When Eunkyum first started at the company, he was like everyone else, full of ambitions for his family's sake, hoping to have a purpose and be useful somewhere. He even made sure he gave good first impressions to his seniors. He did his best for the past year, so he won't be stuck doing menial tasks like Jihyuk gave him. It's an impossible task anyway, and since it was due the next day, staying up all night might not be enough to complete it. But it's not like he had any choice in the matter, despite knowing that it's probably not something that the company needs, or something that Eunkyum can gain some experience from doing, even if the real reason behind the task was simply for Jihyuk to torment Eunkyum. Eunkyum did his best after a newfound motivation for doing it, even if it was to prove a point to Jihyuk. Unfortunately, it is impossible to do in such a short period. Despite all the fuss and the amount of time Eunkyum spent on the list, he still only managed to come up with 180 clients by the next day. Jihyuk wasn't impressed with this, and he ensured that Eunkyum and the rest of their co-workers knew it. Not only did Jihyuk criticize him for not being able to complete the list despite having an online research certificate, the list wasn't even mentioned in the meeting they had that day. They were making all Eunkyum's efforts worthless, which is just horrible. Then again, this shows how having a face isn't enough. I feel awful for Eunkyum and don't like him that much. Anyway, Eunkyum was feeling upset about it. He spent his break on the rooftop raging about Jihyuk and his pettiness. It almost brought Eunkyum to tears, too, until he caught himself. After all, there's no telling when the prick will stop messing with him. Eunkyum had to stay strong, or he really won't make it. And so, he filled his head instead of how he would get his revenge on Jihyuk. As he descended from the rooftop, he came upon Jihyuk, surrounded by some of their co-workers. Eunkyum tried to avoid the group sneakily, but one of the female employees saw him and called him over. Jihyuk wanted to introduce them to a bar that he knew, and they wanted to invite Eunkyum to come with them. But he refused, saying he was tired and not feeling that good. And what do you know? The prick Jihyuk even had the nerve to show concern for Eunkyum's condition, despite obviously knowing he was at fault. Anyway, Eunkyum tried his best not to show his hostility, even though all he could think about was for Jihyuk to experience karma himself. But you know what they say about assuming ill of others attracting it instead. It turns out that's just what's in store for Eunkyum. Later that day, their boss gathered everyone in their team. I showed them the company's new product catalog and even suggested they send handwritten letters with each record to their clients. Well, that's a nice and thoughtful idea, but not something that the rest of the employees welcome. Their boss had the nickname Ha-Ho Mask, a play in his name Hostility. He is the department head and the authority on unnecessary labor. The handle was probably given after resembling the mask, always smiling while being so nasty deep inside. The rest of them had no choice but to agree to their head's suggestion unwillingly. That's not the end of it, though. When the department head asked for Jihyuk's opinion, he decided it was a great idea and designated Eunkyum to be responsible for it, which is the same as saying Eunkyum should do everything by himself. Eunkyum just had enough of Jihyuk's schemes. Then after they dispersed, he asked Jihyuk to talk in private. All the while, he was asking God not to let him end up killing the prick. Once they found a private space, Jihyuk asked Eunkyum what he wanted to discuss. Eunkyum furiously did a kabe dawn on Jihyuk, asking him why he was picking on him for something that happened years ago. Instead of immediately answering or getting intimidated, Jihyuk just commented how Eunkyum finally recognized who he was, and how he probably did after going through their yearbook. Perceptive people are scary. Anyway, Eunkyum once again demanded Jihyuk's reasons, and this time, Jihyuk seemed like he was ready to give it. Grabbing one of Eunkyum's arms, Jihyuk explained that he didn't tell him to do all those things just because of their past. It's just that Eunkyum isn't leading any projects and is probably the youngest among them, having been only there for a year. So, shouldn't he at least look like he's working hard? And if Eunkyum doesn't want to do it, he can refuse. Well, if he puts it that way, that does make sense. So, in the end, Eunkyum is just being his dramatic self. Despite realizing that Jihyuk is right, it's still difficult for Eunkyum to admit it. So, instead, he tried to lash out at Jihyuk, starting by trying to take his arm back that Jihyuk held this whole time. Not that Jihyuk's going to let him have it easy. Before Eunkyum knew it, Jihyuk had already pushed him against the wall. He was restricting his movements by holding both Eunkyum's arms this time. He tried to struggle and break free from Jihyuk's hold, demanding that Jihyuk let him go. Which, of course, Jihyuk didn't, suggesting that Eunkyum would probably swing at him if he did, which will eventually lead to them having a fist fight. Dude, it doesn't even look like Eunkyum can hold himself against you. Anyway, before finally leaving Eunkyum alone, Jihyuk told him that he should do what he was told. Eunkyum stayed on the spot, cursing at Jihyuk, even though the manager is just looking out for him. He sees Jihyuk as the devil who would only give him the choice of doing menial tasks or overtime. And Eunkyum had no choice but to accept it, even if he decided to provide both. And so that weekend, Eunkyum had to bring his homework back to his grandmother's house. He was writing letters instead of resting or having fun with his siblings. As he did, he imagined all sorts of things against Jihyuk to make himself feel better. There's just one thing he hoped, though, that he doesn't run into him again while he's in the area. After all, Jihyuk said that his parents were nearby. Unfortunately, the heavens seemed like it was not on Eunkyum's side. The next day, Eunkyum got dragged outside the house by his siblings, who wanted to play in the park. Having finished all the letters assigned to him, he decided to take it slow and rest on a nearby bench as his siblings played. The weather was nice, making him feel drowsy, but all that disappeared when he saw someone talking to the kids, especially when he recognized that it was, in fact, Jihyuk. Eunkyum was immediately in hostile mode as he took his siblings away from Jihyuk. Despite that, Jihyuk was still nice and polite towards him, And to make matters worse, the kids started scolding their older brother for being rude towards Jihyuk, especially since they were the ones who talked to Jihyuk first. Not that any of it mattered to Jihyuk. It seemed like he already had the twins on his side, even though it was the second time they'd met. It was probably the ice cream, though. Smooth. Instead of gaining brownie points for being nice to his family, the kind gesture annoyed Eunkyum more. And so, once again, he pulled Jihyuk somewhere private. He was demanding why Jihyuk was showing up around him, since it's just making him angry. But again, Jihyuk brushes him off and says that Eunkyum is self-centered. Having had enough, Eunkyum demanded that the two avoid each other outside work, and if they unexpectedly see each other, they should pretend to be strangers. Jihyuk was chill about it. He looks like he'll humor Eunkyum if that's what he wants. Although if Eunkyum thought he had the upper hand by being the aggressive one throughout the conversation, he had it wrong. Jihyuk seemed to have talked to the department head about scrapping the idea of the letters, but remembered that I had to inform Eunkyum earlier. Savage. Of course, Eunkyum was super upset. He did spend half of his weekend writing all those letters by himself in his last attempt to look intimidating. Eunkyum threatened that he would get his revenge on Jihyuk if he kept messing with him. But again, Jihyuk was chill and just smiled at Eunkyum as he humored him again. It was a smile that once again flustered Eunkyum despite himself. On his way to work the next day, Eunkyum was so focused on his phone as he tried to search for ways how to get revenge against his boss. He did get a bunch of ideas, ranging from petty to extreme ones, and by the time he got into the building, a plan had already formed in his mind. Unexpectedly though, he met Jihyuk in the elevator. It was freaking him out for almost getting caught. Well, at least he's still civil. The elevator had an unexpected morning rush, and before they knew it, they were like sardines in a can, having been forced against each other as people seemed to keep coming in. Of course, Eunkyum started feeling flustered again, which just amused Jihyuk. Jihyuk was comparing Eunkyum to an angry penguin, which doesn't make sense. I mean, do penguins even get angry? Those adorable flightless birds have no sore bones in their body. Not one bit. A handsome face isn't much to brag about. Knowing that Eunkyum would probably get more upset if he found out what's making Jihyuk laugh at him, Jihyuk just kept quiet about it. Even when they finally got to their floor, Eunkyum was still upset, which just got worse because of Jihyuk's indifference. He was even pointing out how it's obvious in Eunkyum's face that she's into him. Eunkyum quickly stopped Jihyuk from finishing what he was about to say before somebody else heard it, covering Jihyuk's mouth as he nagged at him for getting ahead of himself. As if on cue, two of their co-workers saw them and asked what they were doing. Eunkyum quickly made some excuse, sending them away in the least suspicious way possible. Before things get more awkward, Eunkyum again tells Jihyuk not to talk to him unless necessary. Despite clearly looking very upset at him, Jihyuk couldn't help but be amazed at Eunkyum's expression. Later that day, Eunkyum was assigned to deliver the catalogs to their clients in person. This means he will be outside the office all day. And before he could even go to the first client's company, he received a call from the department head. He was reminding Eunkyum how important the task was and to report to him at the office afterward. Once again, remind Eunkyum how the department head is the authority for unnecessary labor. Eunkyum was upset, but just like the other menial tasks he was assigned, he had no choice but to do it anyway. Eunkyum spent the whole day going to one company after another. He introduced himself politely and delivered the catalogs in person. He was tired, feeling like he'd aged 10 years in a single day. He was in one of the client company's bathrooms, trying to freshen up before heading back, when he suddenly heard people come. When he realized they were gossiping about him, he tried to be inconspicuous as he listened to them. Even they find the task that he spent the whole day doing menial and unnecessary, calling him a glorified errand boy. Now, that isn't nice. Aren't they just jealous that they could never have his guts to do earnest work as he did? Well, it's making Eunkyum upset day that day. Because when he arrived back at the office to report, department head Ha was nowhere to be found. Despite telling Eunkyum to report to him when she's done, the Ha-ho mask went home early. Probably because she was already tired of running all over the whole day. Not to mention the conversation from the bathroom, Eunkyum seemed more spent than usual, and not just physical too. He was in that sad state in front of the elevator when Jihyuk approached him, asking what she's still doing there, only for Eunkyum to respond with how she's so sick of everything already. More than the words he spoke, it was probably Eunkyum's expression that stunned Jihyuk, and which made Jihyuk ask what had happened out of genuine concern. But of course, to Eunkyum, Jihyuk was one of the people who made him feel like that. It was no wonder that Eunkyum would show such hostility towards him. And it wasn't like that day with his siblings either. Not wanting to talk to Jihyuk, Eunkyum used the staircase instead. But even on his way down, Jihyuk followed him. He was asking Eunkyum what had happened to him while he was out of the office. When Jihyuk finally caught Eunkyum's arm and stopped him abruptly, he was surprised when he saw Eunkyum crying this time. Eunkyum exclaimed as he accused Jihyuk of enjoying toying with people, of how it makes Jihyuk happy seeing Eunkyum get flustered like a moron. Just like at that moment, which makes Eunkyum feel so pathetic. Only after that emotional monologue did Jihyuk finally let him go, especially after Eunkyum claimed that he couldn't stand the sight of Jihyuk. In the days that followed, gone was the Eunkyum, who always gets flustered whenever he meets Jihyuk's gaze, and the interaction between them was reduced to the bare minimum, as if they were strangers, just like how Eunkyum wanted. Jihyuk knew it was just natural for Eunkyum to feel that way, to hate him, especially after all the things that Eunkyum had gone through since they started working together. And yet, Jihyuk couldn't help feeling so bothered by it. One Friday night, Haho Mask strikes again as he calls for a work dinner. Most of the employees complained about it, but just like every time, they had no choice but to comply. The restaurant was already so crowded when Jihyuk arrived that he only found one empty seat, and as if heaven is telling them that enough is enough, it just so happens that the one occupying the one right next to it is Eunkyum. While everyone else is having fun chatting and eating dinner, there are only silence and awkwardness at Eunkyum and Jihyuk's table. Eunkyum got over feeling so upset that day, and what's left now is his embarrassment for having cried before Jihyuk and saying all those words to him. Eunkyum did wonder what Jihyuk could be thinking about now. He assumed that Jihyuk probably didn't even feel responsible for making him feel like that. Just as Eunkyum convinced himself to stop thinking about Jihyuk, his co-worker Hyunsu appeared. Eunkyum took this opportunity to finally leave the table and dragged him to the table where the rest of his co-workers were. Once they were settled in, Eunkyum gratefully hugged Hyunsu. They were thanking his co-worker for getting him away from such an awkward situation. They then started talking about how the manager is especially strict with Eunkyum, yet he seemed nice to everybody else. It's like they're enemies in their past life or something. Eunkyum denied it, saying that Jihyuk was just a bully, and he couldn't wait for Jihyuk to get transferred to another department. Well, there isn't any point fussing over it, so Eunkyum decided just to drink up and get drunk. It's the weekend the next day, anyway, so I might as well chug it all down. The funny thing is, even though Eunkyum got so drunk not long after, his head is still filled with Jihyuk. Jihyuk doesn't even look like he was mad at Eunkyum for what happened in the past, and how Jihyuk never told him why he treated him like that. Somehow, Jihyuk watches him, anticipating his reactions and behaviors and just simply accepting whatever Eunkyum gives him. But even just that pisses Eunkyum off. And yet, he couldn't help himself from thinking about Jihyuk. Eunkyum was in the middle of his musings when suddenly his head fell on the table. He was too drunk even to hold his head up. His co-workers fussed around him until he slowly lost consciousness. The last thing he saw was Jihyuk, who also came to their table looking worried. When Eunkyum regained consciousness, he found himself being piggybacked by someone. He was still dizzy and out of it, but he heard a keypad being keyed in. His first thoughts were that someone was kidnapping him, and he had to get away for the sake of his siblings. Would a kidnapper even be nice enough to piggyback their victim? Don't they throw them over their shoulders like some sack of potatoes? Anyway, Eunkyum tried to resist in his drunken stupor. He was demanding to be put down and be sent home. The person carrying him tried to calm him down, but it made Eunkyum struggle more, and he even started calling the police for help. And this is why we don't drink until we drop people. At the end of the struggle, Eunkyum managed to achieve his goal. Only, now he's under someone instead. Laying on the floor by the entrance door, Eunkyum stared at Jihyuk, who was hovering above him with concern. Eunkyum recognized Jihyuk immediately, and despite his drunken state, Eunkyum punched Jihyuk. He was sending Jihyuk on back. Eunkyum quickly straddled him then, asking Jihyuk what he was doing there and to get lost. Jihyuk explained they were in his house, but Eunkyum won't listen. He probably felt like he's been given a chance. Eunkyum grabbed Jihyuk's collar and started pouring out all his pent-up emotions. He's repeating everything he said at the staircase, but with more intense feelings and demanding what Jihyuk wants from him that he can't just seem to leave Eunkyum alone. He probably had more things to say, but once again, he fell, and this time, on top of Jihyuk, too dizzy to even sit up straight. Stroking Eunkyum's hair affectionately, Jihyuk told him to stay the night since it's late. The drunkard demanded that Jihyuk gets off him, even though he was the one who fell on top of him, looking like he didn't mind the situation. Jihyuk then told Eunkyum that he should sober up for now and get mad at him for all he wanted the next day. But see, there's a reason why some people try to get drunk so much, because then they can blame the drink for everything they do. Just like how Eunkyum tried to take a peck on Jihyuk's lips, and then blame it for having too much to drink and being dizzy. But that's not how things work. This is not preschool where peck and run is a thing. Plus, only toddlers can do that. For adults, when they try to steal a peck, they're given a kiss, and a deep one at that, which Jihyuk is so eager to give to his drunken guest. Eunkyum might claim he's making advances because he's drunk, but Jihyuk isn't. What started with a peck escalated into a full-blown make-out session led by the eager Jihyuk. Eunkyum knows that he needs to stop whatever they're doing, but he just can't, swearing that it was all the alcohol's fault. Next thing we know, the two of them are already in the bedroom. Both were half naked as Jihyuk tried to make the drunk Eunkyum feel good using his butt. After Eunkyum finally peaked, Jihyuk took a rubber and started to get inside his drunk subordinate. At first, Eunkyum tried to flail due to Jihyuk's size, but once they both got used to each other, they started to go at it, slowly at first at Eunkyum's request. They kissed again as they did, which made Jihyuk realize how Eunkyum seemed to enjoy kissing, not to mention French kisses as well. It was their first time doing it together, but Jihyuk was learning much about what Eunkyum likes in bed. But before Jihyuk could know more, Eunkyum passed out completely, probably due to being drunk and tired from bed activities. Eunkyum woke up the next morning next to the naked sleeping Jihyuk. Eunkyum was, of course, stunned at the discovery. Soon after, Jihyuk slowly woke up. But before he could say anything coherent to Eunkyum, a pillow was already slapped in his face. Eunkyum then runs away, at least away from the room. Anywhere he turns, all he sees is a room one after another. He was panicking, not just because he couldn't find his way around the place, but also because he realized that he had slept with Jihyuk, whom he supposedly hates. He was mortified when he suddenly saw pieces of his clothing thrown about on the floor, like Hansel and Gretel's breadcrumbs. Not wanting to waste more time, he quickly picked up his clothes. That was how Jihyuk found him, asking him what he was doing, and tried to point him to the bathroom. Eunkyum tried to run away again, but Jihyuk stopped him. I was asking him not to do that. However, Jihyuk had no choice but to let him go since it was Eunkyum who asked that they talk some other time as he wasn't in the mood now. In the cab, Eunkyum had an internal struggle. He was scolding himself for getting drunk and sleeping with his boss. And as if the shirt he's wearing isn't proof enough, memories of the bed exercise they did last night came flooding in. As he tried not to think about it, he realized that his previous shirt wasn't among the pieces he had picked up earlier. As he tried to remember what had happened to it, memories of last night flooded in again. After all, they did do it while he was still wearing his shirt. Eunkyum looked so pathetic as he struggled, trying not to think about what happened last night that even the cab driver felt bad for him. Yes, sir, we do have our moments. By Monday, Eunkyum came to work lamenting how he had spent the whole weekend praying for the company building to burn down. But seeing as it's still there, the prayers didn't work. Yeah, well, suppose prayers work just like that. Every metropolitan would have burned down all its buildings. Eunkyum is in a zombie state when Hyunsu catches up to him, asking if Eunkyum managed to get home safely the other night, and if he remembered what he said to Jihyuk while being so wasted. It turns out that night, Eunkyum kept on saying he had something to say to Jihyuk, but Eunkyum passed out, so Jihyuk took him to his place. Hyunsu was worried that the two of them might have gotten into a fight or something. He was considering how stressed Eunkyum had been because of Jihyuk. Well, they did fight, and something did happen. But it's not for Hyunsu's ears to hear. Do you know how they say one shouldn't talk about things they don't want to happen? Yeah, it turns out it's true. Just then, Jihyuk approached the duo. He then asked Eunkyum if they could talk for a bit, and Eunkyum, of course, had no choice but to consent. After pulling himself together, Eunkyum is back to his strict mode. They were asking Jihyuk what he wanted to talk about. Before getting down to business, Jihyuk handed Eunkyum the shirt he had forgotten at his place, which was quickly snatched from his hand with a heartfelt thanks. Thinking and hoping that was it, Eunkyum tried to leave, but Jihyuk said he was sorry for messing up, and so Eunkyum asked him what exactly he was being sorry about. Jihyuk tried to explain that he was sorry for many things, especially how he treated Eunkyum, but it seemed like Eunkyum didn't want to hear it. After all, a simple apology doesn't cut it. Eunkyum said that he didn't need Jihyuk's apology, nor does he care about Jihyuk's true feelings for him either. He then asked Jihyuk if he was doing that because they slept together. Because if that was the case, then Eunkyum should have slept with him earlier if it was that easy to get an apology from Jihyuk. Well, he was being sarcastic, but he does have a point. Jihyuk, however, just wanted to apologize to Eunkyum, and not because he's trying to make himself feel better either. Then again, Jihyuk's sincerity seemed to have affected Eunkyum somehow, because not long after, he gave in and considered accepting the apology. He then asked Jihyuk what happened after that and if there was still something that Jihyuk wanted from Eunkyum. So, Jihyuk declared that he'd do whatever Eunkyum wanted. Humoring him, Eunkyum said if that's the case, he doesn't want anything to do with Jihyuk anymore. If it's work-related stuff, then there's nothing that can be done. But outside of that, he wants Jihyuk to never appear in front of him for whatever reason. Long story short, Eunkyum doesn't want to see the face that he fell in love with at first sight, and he won't take no for an answer. Clearly understanding Eunkyum's demands and where he's coming from, Jihyuk didn't try to persuade him otherwise anymore. He was promising to keep his distance from Eunkyum just like he wanted. And with that, Eunkyum finally left Jihyuk. Although the conversation ended without problems, the outcome didn't sit well with either. Even Eunkyum, who tried to act tough the whole time and who was calling the shots, felt awful. Still, he knows that it's for the best to keep things that way. When Eunkyum returned to his desk, He was called over by one of his seniors, who gave him some files and told him that under the department head's orders, it was about time for Eunkyum to have more tasks and responsibilities. This, of course, made Eunkyum very happy. Eunkyum was feeling good about himself as he sat down to start on the new task assigned to him. He thought that after a long while, things seemed to be turning for the better. Plus, Eunkyum somehow achieved his goal of getting revenge on Jihyuk, who had just scolded good earlier. Then again, even after everything he said to Jihyuk, it's not like Eunkyum felt any better. Not to mention, every time his gaze drifts toward Jihyuk, Eunkyum couldn't help but remember the night they spent together. To distract himself from an unnecessary trip to memory lane, Eunkyum decided that it was best to focus on work. As he began the task, he tried asking his senior for some other information regarding the data, but apparently, the old was too busy that he couldn't even give a polite answer. Not taking it to heart, Eunkyum decided he'll do his best. Later that day, Eunkyum and Hae-jun were catching up while having some coffee in a cafe. Hae-jun asked Eunkyum if something was up. After all, just recently, Eunkyum looked like he was about to die from stress, and yet now, he seemed excited for some reason. So, Eunkyum assured his friend that he was fine and didn't have to worry about anything. And, of course, Hae-jun took his word for it. Suddenly, a pair entered the cafe, and to Eunkyum's disbelief, one of them is Jihyuk, feeling conscious once again. Eunkyum instinctively cringed at the sight of him, although he still felt curious as to who the woman that was with Jihyuk was. Eunkyum flinched when their gazes met. He hit his head on the wall when he remembered that night again. Hae-jun was quick to check on him, fussing over the bump that was now forming on Eunkyum's forehead. Jihyuk, on the other hand, just stared at the duo, making his companion wonder if he knew those two. But Jihyuk didn't elaborate anything. Soon after, the two of them left after they got their order. Once outside, the woman with Jihyuk commented how he looked like a sulking little kid. And for what it's worth, Jihyuk helped but agree. The next day, the senior acting all high and mighty previously was now fretting over something as Eunkyum greeted him. Not soon after, the department head came to Eunkyum's desk and threw a folder at him, confused about what was making his boss super upset. The department head was scolding Eunkyum for making a mistake over a simple task. He accused Eunkyum of mixing up the client's unit prices. This shook Eunkyum since he was sure he had sent the data without any mistakes. The scolding continued, with the department head saying many things that would have easily torn down any newbie's confidence. And when the rude senior Mr. Park was pulled in since he was someone who was originally in charge of the task, he just pushed all the blame on Eunkyum, despite acting so suspiciously earlier. Eunkyum tried to apologize. He fully believed that it was his fault, but the department head wouldn't hear any of it. And then Jihyuk arrived. The department head called him over and instructed him to deal with the problem at hand. And so, after some explanation, Jihyuk understood that their company had sent the wrong unit price to one of their clients. And again, the high and mighty senior tried to push all the blame onto Eunkyum. He said that because it was his first time doing it, he made such a mistake. But then Jihyuk pointed out that Eunkyum wasn't in the meeting that day and told the senior that it was also his responsibility. Mr. Park claimed that he already organized everything for Eunkyum to make it easier for him. Jihyuk then pointed out how Mr. Park didn't even give it a final check even though he was Eunkyum's supervisor. Mr. Park then claimed that Eunkyum sent the data without first asking him. Even though Eunkyum did, Mr. Park just brushed him off, saying that Eunkyum shouldn't ask him for every little thing. Anyway, while Eunkyum was so out of it, worrying about getting fired, Mr. Park was being grilled by Jihyuk as if it wasn't enough that he was already trying to push all the blame to Eunkyum. Mr. Park kept blabbering about how Eunkyum was getting ahead of himself for trying to prove his worth. Not that Jihyuk is buying any of it. Jihyuk demanded the meeting minutes and the files Mr. Park gave to Eunkyum. After checking them out, he asked Mr. Park if he taught Eunkyum how to look up existing records in the system. Mr. Park then said he did lead Eunkyum when he first started working there, but he still doesn't know how to do it. This doesn't make sense since this was the first time that Eunkyum was handling an account. Looking like he already knew what had happened, Jihyuk stared at Mr. Park, ready to knock him off his high horse. Jihyuk told Mr. Park that everything he said had been a lie. Jihyuk accused Mr. Park of pretending to be a nice guy and acting like he was just trying to protect his junior staff member, even though he gave the wrong files to Eunkyum. Jihyuk pointed out how the unit prices were already switched, even before the data was given to Eunkyum. Mr. Park was the one who made a mistake, and yet he still claimed that he did nothing wrong. Jihyuk sarcastically told Mr. Park how busy he must have been and couldn't even remember what he wrote himself. That, or he wants the newbie to get into trouble. Jihyuk then sent Eunkyum away, assuring him that it wasn't his fault and there was no need to feel bad. And so, Eunkyum took his leave. When just the two were left, Jihyuk pointed out that he'd already seen Mr. Park brush off his subordinates whenever they asked a question, just like how he had treated Eunkyum. He also told him how it's important that a document is triple-checked before sending it to the client, something that should be already obvious for a senior staff such as Mr. Park. Mistakes are given. It is important to ensure it never happens again. However, trying to blame others for one's mistakes is a different story. Embarrassing, even. This was the point when Mr. Park started to apologize profusely, trying to deny the fact that he was trying to push the blame on Eunkyum. Well, since it was Jihyuk's Eunkyum that Mr. Park was trying to frame, Jihyuk won't let him off easily. As punishment, he told Mr. Park to write up a guideline so that they'll be able to avoid similar incidents happening in the future. And since Mr. Park doesn't look like the type to reflect simply by writing an apology letter, Jihyuk warned him that he'd keep a close eye on him from then on. Well, he didn't learn his lesson, because when Jihyuk left him to go somewhere, Mr. Park cursed at Jihyuk. Seriously, there are nerves in some people. They were already the ones at fault, but they still think the world owes them something. Jihyuk went to the rooftop, where he found Eunkyum as expected. He was probably feeling that it was Jihyuk who suddenly arrived. Eunkyum tried to hide inconspicuously in the corner. Unfortunately, Jihyuk doesn't look like he intends just to let Eunkyum wallow in self-pity. Turning a corner, Jihyuk found Eunkyum crouched down with his head buried in his arms. Jihyuk approached him, again assuring him that it wasn't his fault. When Eunkyum looked up, he was crying for real, letting out his frustrations about how it seemed like everything just seemed to go downhill for him, even though he's always been doing his best. As Jihyuk tried to reassure Eunkyum that he was blameless this time, Eunkyum said he no longer wants to work there since it's draining. And somehow, Jihyuk felt like he was partly to be blamed for Eunkyum feeling like that. Probably, not knowing what to do anymore. Jihyuk gently brushed Eunkyum's chin, turning Eunkyum's face in his direction and telling him not to cry anymore. Seeing him do it makes him feel weird. Previously, we ended with Jihyuk saving Eunkyum from getting into trouble at work. Eunkyum Sr. made a mistake and pinned the blame on him. After going to the rooftop to wallow in self-pity, Eunkyum was consoled by Jihyuk, who assured him it wasn't his fault. Could this be the start of another chapter in their relationship? Eunkyum is once again spaced out while on break at work, thinking about Jihyuk. They just had a moment at the rooftop, with Jihyuk again showing a side of him that makes Eunkyum feel significant since Jihyuk just helped him out from getting into trouble. Jihyuk told Eunkyum not to cry because it made him feel weird. What could he mean by that? Could Jihyuk be making fun of him again since Eunkyum called before him? Or was there something more? It could also be because Jihyuk had weird preferences. We might never know. After all, it's wise always to be suspicious of good-looking guys, especially if they're tall, dark, handsome, and single. Eunkyum was so focused on his thoughts that he didn't notice Yoonsu coming up from behind, scaring Eunkyum. Of course, our MC just had to get his revenge. But as they struggled to get the upper hand, Eunkyum lost his balance. He would have fallen on his butt if it weren't for Jihyuk catching him just in time. As if that wasn't good enough of a gesture, Jihyuk was gentle and friendly to Eunkyum yet again, only telling Yoonsu off, making Eunkyum get more confused about what Jihyuk is up to. Safe to say, Jihyuk is just raking up brownie points all day. Eunkyum is, of course, grateful to Jihyuk for helping him with the client unit price mix-up, but Eunkyum also worries that Jihyuk might ask him for money in return. Dude, he's more well-off than you. You even got lost in his apartment last time, did you not? Come Friday, a work dinner is again happening, much to everyone's dismay. But it is what it is. The least they could do is make the most of it. Work dinners meant free food and drinks, after all. Just as Eunkyum tried to call Yoonsu and Junghoon to their table, Jihyuk suddenly implanted himself beside Eunkyum. Jihyuk glanced intensely at Yoonsu and Junghoon, wordlessly telling them to leave. The two got the message loud and clear, of course. He remembered what happened at the work dinner when he got so drunk last time. Not to mention the after-party at Jihyuk's place. Eunkyum told himself he couldn't get drunk this time. Still, somebody must get drunk. It's a work dinner, after all. Plus, where's the fun if nobody does? Later that evening, as it so happens, the Haho mask also sat on Eunkyum's table. Seeing as the department head was in such a good mood as he offered to pour Eunkyum a drink, Eunkyum knew it wouldn't end well for him. Look at this older man smiling as if he didn't just give Eunkyum a scare for his life earlier that week. Anyway, someone was trying to gain some brownie points again. Jihyuk came onto the scene and took the department head's attention from Eunkyum to him. The department head often took one of the employees to get drunk on work dinners like this, and Jihyuk took the role this time for the sake of brownie points, saving Eunkyum from it, a modern-day knight in shining armor. Eunkyum was glad it looked like he wouldn't get drunk this time. Still, where's the fun in not having some spice? After the work dinner, Eunkyum was assigned as Jihyuk's designated caretaker after he got so drunk. He's got to return the favor, both last time and this time. It's the least he could do. Having no choice in the matter, Eunkyum resigned himself to the role. Eunkyum ended up bringing Jihyuk to his place, partly to make it even for doing the same for him the last time and partly for saving his bum earlier. Eunkyum didn't ask Jihyuk to save him, but he still did, which ended up with Jihyuk in this state, dead drunk and yummily sprawled in his bed. Thinking that Jihyuk's tie looked uncomfortable as he slept, Eunkyum considered undoing it. But he caught himself, seeing as it looked like he was taking advantage of him now. And, of course, trying to undo his belt is not, which is what exactly Eunkyum tried to do next. But as he did, Jihyuk woke up, catching him in the act. Realizing what this looks like, Eunkyum tried to explain himself by justifying his actions. However, instead of saying anything, Jihyuk hugged Eunkyum to the bed. And when Eunkyum tried to get away, Jihyuk pulled him again for a kiss. And it's not just on the lips. Flustered, Eunkyum tried to push Jihyuk once again, telling the drunk, sexy man that he only brought him there because he's drunk and not because he wants to do stuff with him. Yeah, well, we all know where this is headed, anyway. Drunkenly, Jihyuk reminded him that Eunkyum had just tried taking his clothes off earlier. Geez, this dude is so green in the head for such a severe man. Eunkyum tried to justify his actions again, but Jihyuk stopped his tirade with another kiss. And so, Eunkyum again ended up in the bed with Jihyuk above him. As Jihyuk continued to make out with Eunkyum, our MC couldn't help thinking it looked like they'd end up like last time. You don't say. In his previous attempt to stop Jihyuk's advances, Eunkyum again tells Jihyuk to go home since he doesn't like Eunkyum anyway. But shamelessly, Jihyuk mumbled and admitted that he did. Jihyuk then started telling Eunkyum that he was so cute, pretty, and hot, with soft skin. All the while, he was kissing and groping Eunkyum all over. Jihyuk just doesn't filter anything when he's drunk. He's so wicked now. A wicked, honest drunk. But still, it's pretty sweet, so he's okay. Not stopping at just compliments, Jihyuk admitted that he can't stop thinking about Eunkyum at all, and that he hates seeing Eunkyum with other guys. At that moment, Eunkyum couldn't help feeling like he finally won, even though it wasn't even a fight to begin with. A narcissistic pity man needs to have his moments occasionally. Feeling good at his victory, Eunkyum feels like making Jihyuk want him more and tries to seduce him instead. He was initiating the kiss and groping this time. Eunkyum goaded Jihyuk if he's up for it. He saw that Jihyuk was drunk and all, but Jihyuk just smiled at him mysteriously. Looks like someone is going to be in trouble. Do you know that saying about biting more than you can chew? Well, that's just what's happening to our MC now. He was so confident instigating his boss earlier, yet now he's just begging for him to stop. Not that it's a problem for us. Eunkyum is biting lots of things that he can't handle. That said, Jihyuk was relentless. He won't even give Eunkyum a break. One couldn't even tell that Jihyuk was drunk earlier that evening. His face might be flushed, but it's not just because of the alcohol. How can an intoxicated person even have that much stamina anyway? And in Jihyuk's defense, it was Eunkyum who asked for it. Jihyuk isn't helping at all, either. What with both the touching and those kinds of talks he's doing with his first love, and again, it's not like we're complaining. A point came where the first one to fall was Eunkyum. Again, he complained about how he couldn't move a muscle anymore. He curses at Jihyuk for doing it so much that they have already lost count. But Jihyuk just let Eunkyum rant all he wants, kissing and being gentle. Finally, Eunkyum fell dead asleep. Even then, Jihyuk didn't stop. Okay, that just sounded weird, but it's not that bad. It's just kissing and caressing and stuff. The point is that Jihyuk is so obsessed with Eunkyum, and he's not holding back and showing it. And now, Eunkyum is starting to regret instigating Jihyuk. Just saying. But things don't always work out the way Eunkyum wants, do they? The following day, Eunkyum woke up with puffed eyes from all the crying he had done the night before. However, he and Jihyuk are, as expected, sleeping beside each other. Throw in being butt naked and spooning, too. What's unexpected, however, is that they are still connected. The moment Eunkyum realized this, he involuntarily cursed at Jihyuk, realizing that Jihyuk continued doing stuff the night before, even after Eunkyum passed out. Eunkyum couldn't help admiring Jihyuk's stamina. However, that doesn't help with his current dilemma. Jihyuk had Eunkyum glued to him both in their upper and lower bodies. Eunkyum wanted to untangle himself from Jihyuk. However, he knows that if Jihyuk wakes up, he'll probably start again. And so, Eunkyum tried and struggled to get away as discreetly as possible. After all, Jihyuk is in no way lacking in that part. And just as Eunkyum was about to succeed finally, Jihyuk suddenly grabbed Eunkyum by his stomach and pulled him back to his original place. This sneaky, tall, dark, handsome, and wicked is a fine specimen. Disregarding Eunkyum's struggles, Jihyuk continued to kiss him here and there. Turns out, Jihyuk had been awake the moment Eunkyum cursed at him earlier, pretending to be asleep and relishing Eunkyum's desperate efforts, such as the fate of weak UKs. And so, once again, Eunkyum had to resign himself to his fate. Not that he's not enjoying himself as well. Dusk came, and finally, the hot wicked guy calmed down. He even helped Eunkyum get into his PJs. However, he's probably going to take it off him later yet again. Before that happens, though, Eunkyum will hold over his dominance as much as he can. Eunkyum was upset that his set had disappeared in the blink of an eye. He had spent the whole day doing it with Jihyuk. Once again, he demanded that Jihyuk leave. And once again, Eunkyum was ignored by him. Instead, Jihyuk pulled Eunkyum for a full-body hug. Jihyuk asked Eunkyum if he remembered what he told him the day before. And when Eunkyum tried to play dumb, Jihyuk started repeating his confession. Plus, some more stuff that he didn't say but is pleasant to the ears, so let's just let him be. The two started making out again. This time, Eunkyum didn't resist Jihyuk. Jihyuk asks if he could take Eunkyum's response to his kiss as a sign of him accepting his confession. Eunkyum is, of course, happy with the development of their relationship. He has wanted this since Chapter 1 when Eunkyum saw Jihyuk at the subway. But that doesn't mean he'll give in easily. Jihyuk did have his way and fun for a while as he toyed with Eunkyum. So, struggling a little bit more is justifiable, and more fun as well. Eunkyum then mischievously told Jihyuk that he would like whomever he wanted. But that doesn't mean the receiving person should feel the same. That said, Eunkyum claimed he's just up for hooking up with Jihyuk occasionally. In short, he's saying they should be friends with benefits, and most probably exclusive, too. Since it's so obvious now that their feelings are mutual, Eunkyum knew that if Jihyuk persisted, he'd eventually give in. At the office the following week, Eunkyum was still struggling and exhausted from his weekend affairs despite the culprit of being Jihyuk. Since Eunkyum is a sucker for him, he buys a healthy drink for Jihyuk. Later that day, Jihyuk saw a can of a drink called Eyes of Danby, which he didn't like at all. At first, he thought that it was left there by the department head and was just about to throw it, but a nearby female employee said it was a drink left by Eunkyum. Jihyuk opened it and started gulping it down in a heartbeat. Jihyuk looked like he was about to throw up at the taste, but since it was a drink that Eunkyum liked, all he had was praise. They are such a pair. Both have no sense of pride when it comes to each other. I'm rooting for them, but they're still so cringy. Eunkyum was having his afternoon break when he encountered a very depressed Yoonsu. Turns out, he got scammed online buying a laptop from someone. As he and Junghoon tried cheering Yoonsu up, Eunkyum noticed Jihyuk glancing in their direction. Feeling mischievous, Eunkyum started giving his close friends hugs for Jihyuk to see. After all, he did say that he gets jealous whenever Eunkyum is with other guys. To Eunkyum's annoyance, however, Jihyuk just left without reacting to his skit. As I said, things don't always work out how Eunkyum wants. By the time Eunkyum finished all his work for the day, most of his coworkers had already left except Jihyuk, who seemed like he was still so engrossed in something on his desk. Suddenly, Jihyuk called Eunkyum to come over to his desk and ask him if he knew how to use their office's system. And when Eunkyum timidly admitted that he doesn't, Jihyuk silently cursed at Mr. Park, who claimed that he had already taught Eunkyum about it. Yeah, well, what could one expect from a weasel? Anyway, as smoothly as if it's something he often does, Jihyuk suddenly grabbed Eunkyum to his lap and started explaining how the system works. Of course, Eunkyum was flustered and tried to get away, worried that someone might see them in such an inappropriate position, especially since Jihyuk can't seem to keep his hands to himself. But Jihyuk assured him it was fine and Eunkyum should focus on his explanation. But, of course, Eunkyum is so distracted. When he mumbled that he was hungry, Jihyuk was attentive enough and asked him if they should grab dinner then. Why are fine men only found on pages and screens? What injustice is this? When Eunkyum agreed to get dinner, Jihyuk asked if he wanted to come to his place after dinner. Although he liked the idea, Eunkyum asked why he should go over to Jihyuk's place, to which Jihyuk just answered that it was because it was closer to work. This means Eunkyum can sleep in the morning, and they can stay up late at night doing other things. Safe to say, our MC doesn't need any more convincing than that. Later in the evening, as soon as they arrived at Jihyuk's place, tall, dark, handsome, sexy Jihyuk didn't waste time and immediately lifted Eunkyum to his shoulder and brought him to the sofa. He was getting down to business despite Eunkyum's resistance. This is the whole point of why Eunkyum is staying over in the first place. Of course, Jihyuk didn't miss mentioning Eunkyum hugging Yoonsu and Junghoon while they were at it. Looks like someone is, in fact, very jealous after all. As soon as the first round was over, Jihyuk again lifted Eunkyum. I am declaring that they should move to the bed next. This situation is very conflicting. The corners of my mouth are moving up on their own. So weird. However, they didn't reach the bedroom before Jihyuk decided to do some action again in what looked like his dressing room. While they're at it, he once again brought up about the skit that Eunkyum did earlier that day. The jealous types are just adorable at times. Jihyuk continued to bug Eunkyum until he admitted that even if he gets close with other guys, it's only Jihyuk who he'll sleep with. Someone can hold a grudge. Again, adorable. The next day, Eunkyum woke up on Jihyuk's bed, but the latter wasn't there. Heading to the kitchen, he found a bag with a couple of bento boxes. He was realizing that Jihyuk had probably gone out to buy breakfast. Although Eunkyum appreciated the gesture, he admitted that Jihyuk could have just prepared a simple meal for them. But that was when he noticed the state of Jihyuk's kitchen. Apparently, Jihyuk tried to make breakfast himself, but clearly, he's no Michelin star chef and just managed to make a mess out of his kitchen instead of a proper meal. He did try to cover it up by inviting Eunkyum to eat in the living room, but even the simpleton Eunkyum could see through it all. It's first thing in the morning, and they're already advertising for ants. Eunkyum was going to his place, and Jihyuk looked like he would be tagging along. Jihyuk wants to give him at least a ride. This friends with benefits thing's working out for them, right? And here we are, going to find anyone. Or am I the only one? As Eunkyum was rejecting Jihyuk's offer, he suddenly got a call from someone, which sent him in a hurry to the hospital. He came upon his aunt in the hospital, looking after the twins and grandma in a hospital bed. The twins excitedly greeted their older brother. But as soon as they saw Jihyuk, who entered the room shortly after and dutifully with a basket of fruits, he and the twins quickly disappeared into the hallway. Grandma had a slight fall while she was out on a walk, and was told to stay in the hospital for a week. Eunkyum was worried for her, but his aunt knew exactly how to lighten up the mood by bringing up the gorgeous and tall friend he brought with him. The auntie understands. Looks like Jihyuk already got the whole family's approval at this point. Soon after, Eunkyum came looking for his siblings and found them comfortable with Jihyuk. At the sight of them, Eunkyum couldn't help thinking how Jihyuk looked like he was their dad. What with Yuno comfortably resting on Jihyuk's arms and Yuna trying to eat her ice cream inconspicuously. She knew Eunkyum would reprimand her for it. By how things look, Eunkyum had no choice but to stay at Grandma's place for the night. Even though his aunt assured him that there was nothing to worry about, Eunkyum decided to stay with them for the whole week while Grandma was confined and help look after the twins. Much to Yuna's excitement, that was when Jihyuk offered to give Eunkyum a ride to work for the whole week. After all, his parents' house was also in the area, so he could stay there for the week. This relationship is progressing fast. What's next? Are they going to start living under one roof? That was when cute and innocent little Yuna devised a brilliant idea, telling Jihyuk to sleep over their place like her brother. While Eunkyum tried to reprimand Yuna, Yuno suddenly woke up from his nap and joined his sister's whine about having Jihyuk stay over. Well, they will begin to live under one roof now. Back at their grandmother's house, Yuna is upset with her big brother for not letting Jihyuk stay over the night. The twins clung to Jihyuk, and no amount of persuasion from Eunkyum could convince them to let the matter go. It was only when the twins started crying that Eunkyum finally gave in. Well, what's a big brother to do when the little ones begin to turn on the waterworks? Not to mention after. Kids can hold grudges. Anyway, not long after, the twins are all over Jihyuk once again. Now that they finally got what they wanted and were comfortably in their PJs, they happily showed Jihyuk the games on their tablet. There was no sign of them ever throwing a tantrum and giving their big brother a headache earlier. And they shamelessly owned it, too. One would think it was all a conspiracy, which it probably is. Eunkyum gave Jihyuk the most oversized shirt he had to change, and, seeing as it was an impromptu stay, after letting Jihyuk know where the bathroom was, Eunkyum led his siblings to bed. As expected, this gesture is nothing to Eunkyum. For Jihyuk, however, it's probably equivalent to having warm fuzzy feelings in the stomach. Not tall, dark, and handsome Jihyuk acting like a schoolgirl. Unexpectedly, Eunkyum couldn't immediately return to Jihyuk as he fell asleep while tucking his siblings into bed. When he woke up, he found Jihyuk in the living room, waiting for him. Eunkyum was only trying to have an innocent conversation about the day's unexpected events, but Jihyuk had other ideas. Not long after, the two were full-blown making out on the sofa, and it probably would have escalated if it weren't for Eunkyum standing his ground, telling Jihyuk that they couldn't just do as they pleased since they were not alone in the house, to which Jihyuk interpreted that Eunkyum was also in the mood if it weren't for the twins' presence in the other room. Jihyuk was aggressive towards Eunkyum, and he's not holding back in letting our MC know. Once again, Jihyuk asked Eunkyum if he could drive him to and from work for the next week. Eunkyum refused the offer, but as expected, Jihyuk refused. These two are just so cringy, I'm getting hives. In Jihyuk's defense, it's just because he wants to spend more time with Eunkyum. If Eunkyum stays with the twins, they can't spend the night together and they'll only see each other at work. Even there, they barely see each other, and Eunkyum doesn't let Jihyuk get touchy while on the clock. Jihyuk says he's already compromising since he doesn't like it, so Eunkyum should compromise as well with the arrangement Jihyuk is suggesting. But Eunkyum, being Eunkyum, concluded that Jihyuk only wanted to give him a ride so they could do stuff. Jihyuk denied it, claiming he wanted to spend time with Eunkyum as much as possible. Eunkyum could see through him and couldn't help thinking that Jihyuk was becoming increasingly shameless as the day passed. I couldn't agree more. And to think they still don't have an official label yet. It's 6:28. And Jihyuk is already awake while Eunkyum is still asleep beside him. The night before, they agreed to wake up at 6:30 to have plenty of time to get ready and get to work on time. No matter what Jihyuk does, Eunkyum is hard to wake up. Jihyuk was having fun thinking of ways to make it happen and was probably just about to do something naughty when the twins suddenly entered the room. In a heartbeat, Jihyuk was back to lying on the bed. Once again, he pretended to be asleep as he listened to the twins adorably comment on how Jihyuk's feet were enormous. And what do you know? Not Jihyuk's fondling and groping, but the twins' babbling that woke Eunkyum up. This guy seriously needs help with his priorities. He even had the audacity to try to laugh as Eunkyum told the twins to leave him alone. He did a great job holding it in, though. Otherwise, it would have been real awkward. Long story short, Eunkyum failed to stand his ground on Jihyuk's refusal to his refusal. He found himself heading to work in Jihyuk's car and being overly conscious about it as well. Eunkyum once again wondered if Jihyuk's feelings for him were real. Jihyuk seemed to know how to reassure Eunkyum's doubts or make him more confused, as if he were some sort of. Jihyuk suddenly reached for Eunkyum's hand to hold. Despite Eunkyum's confusion and nervousness, the two had each other throughout the drive. Once they arrived at the parking lot, Eunkyum exclaimed that he'd leave first since it would look weird if someone saw them together. Jihyuk tried to make an excuse, but Eunkyum didn't back down. He told Jihyuk to come up after 3 minutes. Eunkyum hurriedly left the car, leaving a very amused Jihyuk thinking about suggesting doing stuff in the car just as Eunkyum expected. Later that evening, Eunkyum stared at Jihyuk's suitcases in the hallway of his grandmother's house. Jihyuk is also officially staying over for the week, making Eunkyum feel more indebted to him. Jihyuk is busier than Eunkyum, yet he still offered to drive distance to give him a ride to work. That is what you call genuine dedication. It's rare among men nowadays. Since Eunkyum can't do anything about the situation, he decides to go with the flow. He tried acting casual and came upon Jihyuk and Yuna having fun using a picture filter on Jihyuk's phone. Eunkyum agreed to join them and was about to take a groupie of the three when suddenly Jihyuk covered Yuna's eyes and kissed Eunkyum. Before the surprised Eunkyum could do anything, Jihyuk snatched his phone away, securing the photo. Eunkyum tried to take it back, and even Yuna attempted to join out of curiosity, but Jihyuk had the upper hand. However, before Jihyuk could damage little Yuna's innocence, Eunkyum forced her to turn in for the night, and as they left Jihyuk, blushing, Eunkyum was glaring at him. So cringy and adorable. I cannot. Frantic Eunkyum demanded Jihyuk's phone as the latter was lying comfortably on his bed. Of course, Eunkyum wanted to delete the photo, worried that someone might happen to see it and put them in a very compromising situation or something. Jihyuk assured him it was doubtful, but Eunkyum wouldn't rest it, so Jihyuk hid the phone under his shirt and told Eunkyum to get it if he dared. Annoyed, Eunkyum didn't hesitate and grabbed Jihyuk's shirt in a well-toned, smoking hot torso to reveal the phone. What a criminal. But what do you know? The criminal is assaulted at the end. As Eunkyum struggled to make Jihyuk unlock his phone to delete the photo, Jihyuk was also getting very busy groping and fondling Eunkyum. He wanted to do something more intimate, if not just to make Eunkyum let the photo matter go. Jihyuk stopped touching here and there after Eunkyum said he would stop trying to delete the photo, and instead, they'll turn in for the night and sleep. Once again, frustrated, poor Eunkyum had to give in and let Jihyuk have his way. The following day, back at the office, department head Haho Mask suddenly asked Jihyuk if he was seeing someone. He's considering introducing his daughter to Jihyuk since they happen to be of the same age. Although if their co-workers had a say in the matter, Jihyuk is by no means the department head's first and only choice. Eunkyum and Jihyuk were sitting right next to each other. This made it possible for Eunkyum to observe Jihyuk's reaction to the inquiry passively. Jihyuk was blunt as he admitted that he was not in a relationship. Not yet, at least. Jihyuk's response called for an intense reaction from the rest of their co-workers, who couldn't believe it. In their eyes, Jihyuk looked like he was already committed to someone and on the road to settling down that he. But at the same time, not yet. He did admit that there's someone he's interested in. A response that once again led their co-workers to have intense reactions. Being the curious gossip they are, Jihyuk is bombarded with questions about his mysterious special someone. He was even on the brink of dropping a significant hint if it weren't for Eunkyum suddenly squeezing his thigh under the table. The dude is probably just messing with him anyway. When asked if the apple of his eye was pretty, Jihyuk inconspicuously glanced at Eunkyum as he answered yes, sliding his hand on Eunkyum's to hold it in place with his. The teasing intensified after being asked if he had a photo of his special someone. Jihyuk admitted to it, although he claimed it was only for his eyes. The department head opted to start the meeting, feeling excluded by the before-meeting chit-chat. He was giving up on Jihyuk for his daughter after discovering that Jihyuk is seeing someone, although he's still not in a relationship. As the staff meeting proceeded, Eunkyum's head was not in it. He was stressing about the skit that Jihyuk tried to pull earlier. As revenge, he tried to get a reaction from Jihyuk by once again grabbing and squeezing Jihyuk's thigh under the table. To Eunkyum's confusion, Jihyuk looked unfazed despite how hard he tried. Then again, that wasn't the case at all. Jihyuk is so bothered by what Eunkyum did that before he knew it, Jihyuk zoned out of the meeting himself. This reaction is probably what Eunkyum wanted and found it cute, for what it's worth. Eunkyum, however, regretted his actions as soon as they were alone in the backseat of Jihyuk's car after work. Jihyuk is obviously on a mission to have his way with Eunkyum after the stunt he pulled at the meeting earlier. Well, he had it coming. What did he expect from someone like Jihyuk? The car rattled and creaked as Eunkyum continued to resist Jihyuk. However, no protest and struggle could faze Jihyuk, and it looked like his wish to do it in the car was about to happen. That is until his phone started ringing. Initially annoyed, he froze when he realized who was calling him. The twins wanted him to buy them ice cream and even used Yuna's full marks on their spelling test that day to justify the request. Their innocence is so adorable. If only they knew what Jihyuk was doing to their big brother then. Safe to say, Eunkyum was saved by his siblings at the most crucial time, at least for the time being. And Jihyuk is by no means okay with that. Later that evening, the twins enjoyed the ice cream that Jihyuk bought. He then promised to buy them more next time since they liked it. He told them to get ready for bed as he'd tuck them in for the night. Eunkyum was sitting on his own and observing the trio. He wondered if Jihyuk had always liked and was good at handling kids since he didn't look the part. If only Jihyuk would treat and spoil him as he does with the twins, he would feel way better. After all, didn't Jihyuk look like he was losing it back at the car earlier? Eunkyum was even struggling a lot then, too. Eunkyum wasn't left to his thoughts for long as Jihyuk returned shortly after he led the kids to their room. Jihyuk went straight to Eunkyum, telling him they could do it now that the kids were asleep, much to Eunkyum's surprise since it had just been about 5 minutes since they went in. Jihyuk might not have a soma, but he has Jigglypuff sing. As Eunkyum tried to stand his ground about not doing it with Jihyuk while they were there, Jihyuk wanted to justify it by pointing out how he did a good job holding himself back the whole week and contenting himself with just holding hands and sleeping together. And so Eunkyum accused him of only wanting to do the nasty with him, and who wanted their relationship to be just friends with benefits. Then again, it's not like Eunkyum is entirely wrong. If there is one thing that Jihyuk wanted to do with Eunkyum, it is for them to date. And since Jihyuk hasn't wholly won Eunkyum over, they can't do it. And doing the nasty is the only thing he had permission for. Therefore, it's the only thing they could do for now. The speech was effective because Eunkyum stopped struggling and let Jihyuk do what he wanted. Jihyuk was relentless and didn't stop even when tears started pouring down Eunkyum's face. At first, if his hand weren't covering Eunkyum's mouth, then it would be Jihyuk's mouth instead. And Eunkyum is starting to fall behind Jihyuk's stamina as well. Well, it's a good thing the kids are tucked in, is it? With how they're going at it, even good old innocent me would feel embarrassed. Anyway, halfway through, they did manage to get into the bed, only because Eunkyum insisted. And thank God Jihyuk complied. However, soon after, Eunkyum started saying he'd stop doing it with Jihyuk and calling him mean after he had repeatedly said he didn't want to do it anymore, and yet Jihyuk didn't listen. Jihyuk is being so intense yet again that Eunkyum starts crying for real, which, of course, disconcerted Jihyuk, thinking that he had hurt Eunkyum. But really, it was just Eunkyum being a crybaby because Jihyuk kept on doing whatever he wanted despite Eunkyum telling him not to. Especially since it's not like Eunkyum doesn't want to do it at all. It's just that he doesn't want to do it while the kids are around. Jihyuk tried to explain that he was paying attention to what Eunkyum wanted. He couldn't hold himself back when they were together, which isn't convincing. He did apologize and admit that he was being selfish. But that's it. It's not like Jihyuk could tell Eunkyum the real reasons, being how he finds Eunkyum's reactions cute, like how Eunkyum hugs him while crying, or how Eunkyum pants, or the way that Eunkyum clings to him. Since if you summarize them, it just falls to Jihyuk being obsessed with all of Eunkyum. Jihyuk was getting severe and sentimental. He was just about to seriously tell Eunkyum something important, probably on the brink of bearing his heart out again, when his phone went off again. It isn't just Eunkyum who can't always have things work out the way he wants to. And that's why they're such a pair. Jihyuk wanted to continue the conversation despite his phone ringing. But Eunkyum wouldn't have it. And so, Jihyuk had no choice but to take the call. He sounded annoyed as he did, but as the call proceeded, it turned out that it was indeed an emergency that warranted attention. After the call ended, Jihyuk informed Eunkyum that he had to return to the office despite the time. Jihyuk didn't want to go but wanted to continue their earlier conversation. Eunkyum dismissed it, saying that he was exhausted and would go to sleep himself. He told Jihyuk that they could talk again later. Jihyuk suddenly hugged Eunkyum, admitting he hated leaving him just like that. Love doesn't put food on the table. After sending Jihyuk off and checking the twins in their room, Eunkyum tucked himself into bed. After sleeping right next to each other for days, Eunkyum couldn't help feeling empty and weird now that Jihyuk was not there, and he was now going to sleep by himself. The following day, Eunkyum was staggering as he went to work. He hadn't even gotten to his desk yet but was already exhausted. What about the twins throwing tantrums after discovering that Jihyuk had already left? Not to mention that with his ride already at the office, Eunkyum had no choice but to join the morning rush and commute to work. The silver lining is that Grandma will be discharged the next day, so there's no more reason for him to do the long travel time every day. While in the hallway, Eunkyum unexpectedly meets Jihyuk, who suddenly grabs him to an empty room without a word. As a greeting, Jihyuk told Eunkyum how glad he was that he met him before he left. He then asked if Eunkyum slept well, to which Eunkyum replied that he did like a baby, which is not the case for Jihyuk himself. He was a bit late to react to Jihyuk's words, but Eunkyum realized that Jihyuk is leaving. Seems like the latter had an emergency business trip overseas. Jihyuk was supposed to be at the airport but was waiting for Eunkyum first, whether that was true or not. It's still super sweet. Jihyuk reminded Eunkyum not to get too friendly while he was away. Eunkyum looked like he was about to protest, but seeing as they wouldn't see each other for a while, he sadly wished Jihyuk a safe trip. If Jihyuk had any say, he would stuff Eunkyum into his suitcase and bring him overseas. But he doesn't. The poor guy had terrible luck and bad timing since the day before. As the two held onto each other in the dimly lit supply room, they bid their promises and goodbyes. The teary-eyed twins welcomed Grandma as she was finally discharged from the hospital. Eunkyum shared their feelings of relief, although he was admittedly bothered by what seemed to be the absence of Jihyuk's promised calls. It's good that Eunkyum's family is there to keep his mind off missing Jihyuk. The next day, Eunkyum was on a break with a female co-worker on the rooftop and was shortly after joined by Yoonsu. While Eunkyum kept looking at his phone, the other two were chatting away about wanting to go on a vacation, preferably overseas, which led them to talk about Jihyuk, who had gone on an overseas business trip. Anyway, Eunkyum looked distracted and kept fidgeting at his phone that his coworkers couldn't help asking if he was expecting a call from someone. Just in time, his phone went off, only it wasn't who he was expecting. It was from an unidentified number, which automatically registered as a spam call. Feeling miserable from the false hope, Eunkyum decided to cut his break short and head back first. On his way back, Eunkyum met the shameless Mr. Park chatting with a colleague. Despite everything that's happened, Eunkyum still politely greeted him, but the prick blatantly ignored him and even dared to bump into him purposely. When Mr. Park was reprimanded by his colleague, he just responded how he was annoyed with Eunkyum's face. The prick doesn't own a mirror. There's also the possibility that he doesn't know about its existence, too. Poor thing. Eunkyum is, of course, upset with what happened. Mr. Park had always been a mean prick. However, now he's just bullying Eunkyum for no apparent reason. Well, mean people are miserable people. Although seething from the incident, Eunkyum decided that Mr. Park wasn't worth getting worked up. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of Eunkyum's daily suffering. By the time it was time to head home, it started raining heavily. Since he didn't have an umbrella, he ran to get one from the convenience store. Only it was already sold out. And so, he battled through the rain again and went for the crowded and chaotic train home. His epic commute ended with him getting home looking like a drenched hamster and feeling more miserable than ever. Later that evening, he climbed up on his bed, trying not to let his rough day get him down. Although, he's still quite upset that Jihyuk still hasn't contacted him even though it's been 2 days since he left the country. He tried making excuses for Jihyuk himself. Then again, it's probably just his way of coping with how miserable he felt now. A good night's sleep isn't enough to make Eunkyum feel better. He woke up the following day feeling cold and still felt like crap. Then again, he could just be sick. He did fight through the heavy rain the night before. Despite feeling unwell, Eunkyum still dutifully went to work and did his job. It's day 3 since he last saw Jihyuk, and the longing Eunkyum first felt toward him is starting to turn into hate. At first, Eunkyum claimed there was no way he'd try to text or call Jihyuk first after not hearing anything from the latter for days. But pride is nothing in the face of a lovesick and miserable hamster, and so, despite himself, he texted Jihyuk first. Considering the considerable time difference, he even tried calling Jihyuk's number when evening came. And yet, there's still no answer. The now very upset Eunkyum could only call Hae-jun over to drink. Although Eunkyum's face clearly showed his distraught over something, he didn't let Hae-jun in. Hae-jun mentioned that Eunkyum didn't let him know that Grandma got hospitalized, and how he could have given Eunkyum a ride to work that time. Eunkyum made flimsy excuses, but that got him into thinking that he's only been spending his time with Jihyuk these days, excluding the last 3 days, of course. This, in turn, made Eunkyum think about Jihyuk in general and their relationship. All those thoughts made Eunkyum feel more upset. It was too late when Hae-jun noticed that Eunkyum was chugging soju from a glass of beer. The two of them scuffled as Hae-jun took the sip and scolded his friend for drinking even though he was sick. By the time they were returning, Eunkyum was already drunk, a happy, giddy drunk. It's a good thing Hae-jun is such a nice guy and looked after Eunkyum properly. Although, of course, he's still giving our little drunk the scolding he deserved. They were almost home when the hiccuping and sniffling Eunkyum suddenly hugged and clung to Hae-jun. Though Eunkyum was professing his appreciation for his friend, he was thinking about how Jihyuk was a bit bigger and cuddlier than Hae-jun when someone suddenly called his name. It was Jihyuk in the flesh, looking very upset as he demanded Eunkyum to go to him. Hae-jun did not recognize Jihyuk, so he asked Eunkyum if he knew him. Eunkyum didn't say anything, though, as he thought that he was hallucinating Jihyuk being there. Jihyuk, however, didn't waste time walking towards the two and ultimately pulling Eunkyum from Hae-jun's arms. Jihyuk also unceremoniously took off Hae-jun's coat that Eunkyum was wearing and tossed it over to Hae-jun. He then scolded the very confused Eunkyum for drinking so much as he dragged him away. He was leaving the equally confused Hae-jun to fend for himself. We aren't going to have a love triangle between them, are we? Without saying anything, Jihyuk dragged Eunkyum to his place. Eunkyum is very upset and feels miserable for being played by Jihyuk, who suddenly appears out of nowhere. And so, the wobbling Eunkyum held his ground, ready to give Jihyuk a piece of his mind. Eunkyum tried to make a point, at least as much as his drunken self can. He's acting like an upset lover, throwing a tantrum for ignoring their calls. No wait, he is. But Jihyuk knows and understands exactly what's going on. So, instead of adding fuel to the fire, he just tried to calm Eunkyum down. Jihyuk also attempted to explain why he couldn't call Eunkyum, but Eunkyum wouldn't hear any of it, although his outburst at least made him reasonable enough not to resist going back to his place. Once inside, Jihyuk tried to help drunk Eunkyum out of his clothes, but as expected, the tantrum isn't over yet. Eunkyum accused Jihyuk of only wanting to do it with him now that he was done with work and even tried to lead himself. Jihyuk, of course, is a gentleman, even though he's probably holding himself back hard from jumping on Eunkyum then and there. Then again, thanks to Eunkyum's intoxication and sickness, he can honestly say what he feels about Jihyuk. Despite Eunkyum's outbursts, Jihyuk still manages to try and deal with him calmly by telling Eunkyum that he'll let him do whatever he wants with him as soon as Eunkyum gets better. Not that it had any good effect on Eunkyum's mood. Instead, Eunkyum tried a passive-aggressive approach to get under Jihyuk's skin. He was acting as if what they had didn't matter to him. Friends with benefits, we get it. And if Jihyuk doesn't want to do it with him, then Eunkyum will look for somebody else instead. Eunkyum might have just said it as a last resort, but it did manage to get the reaction he wanted from Jihyuk. Pinning Eunkyum down to the bed, Jihyuk asked if he was talking about Hae-jun. Well, it's probably been eating him since earlier. I mean, anyone would be jealous if they see their potential lover being so intimate with someone else. Realizing that Jihyuk is showing his jealousy over his best friend, Eunkyum goes along with it, which, of course, further upset Jihyuk. Eunkyum, unlike Jihyuk, would instead escalate arguments even though they're not both sober. Well, yeah, it's probably because he's not sobbing in the first place that Eunkyum is adding fuel to the fire. Just the thought of any other man sleeping with Eunkyum is very upsetting for Jihyuk. And so, with his last button pushed, Jihyuk gave in to what Eunkyum wanted, promising him not to stop unless Eunkyum begged himself, to which Eunkyum confidently retorted that he would never want Jihyuk to stop anyway. Well, we already know how that's going to end for him. And so the two of them went all out once again. But while doing it, Eunkyum realized that what they're doing now is unlike what they had been doing before Jihyuk left. That's to say, no talking or affection was given. It's just pure physical contact. Finally realizing that he was in the wrong for suggesting just a physical relationship in the first place, Eunkyum begged Jihyuk to stop. Being just friends with benefits isn't what Eunkyum wants. He understands this now. Eunkyum started crying in Jihyuk's arms. When asked why he was being emotional out of nowhere, Eunkyum admitted that he was just upset. He had been waiting for Jihyuk's call for days, which had never come. And Eunkyum's calls aren't going through, either. Eunkyum kept worrying and thinking about Jihyuk, but there was nothing on Jihyuk's side. Despite everything they've gone through, Eunkyum felt his feelings weren't mutual, and he was the only one who cared. But that isn't the case, and Jihyuk knows it well. The problem lies with the two of them being unable to tell each other about their true feelings for each other. Oh geez, this is why communication is essential. How will your partner know anything if you say nothing? Jihyuk retells what happened a few days ago. Jihyuk just arrived at the airport and was thinking of what to text Eunkyum. He looked serious as he thought of various lines to text, ranging from simply informing Eunkyum that had landed to asking about Eunkyum's work or what he had for dinner. He was about to decide on "I arrived safely and I miss you" when a clumsy, bespectacled man slammed at Jihyuk's back, making Jihyuk accidentally drop his phone. Well, it's probably okay if he dropped it to the floor. Unfortunately, it isn't. The phone didn't stop on the floor and instead dived past the handrails and walls that led to the escalator next floor down. RIP Jihyuk's phone. The clumsy man turned out to be someone from the company, who was tasked to pick Jihyuk up and guide him. In his defense, he was trying to do his best for Jihyuk, but things don't seem to work for him. At one point, he even accidentally threw coffee on Jihyuk. Jihyuk was seething, but it's not like anything will change if he gets angry. Jihyuk did try calling Eunkyum by borrowing the phone of his guide. Cue the mysterious caller from a couple of chapters back, which Eunkyum didn't answer, as we already know. While resting in his hotel room and about to turn in for the night, he couldn't help thinking about Eunkyum. He is paranoid and anxious about why his calls are being ignored. It's along the lines of Eunkyum's worries around this time, too. They are such a pair, seriously. Despite looking like he's got the short end in their relationship, Jihyuk still couldn't help falling for Eunkyum. All he could think about were Eunkyum's good qualities and Jihyuk's inability to control himself around Eunkyum. Even now that they're apart, he's also having difficulty distracting himself from thinking about Eunkyum. And so, he promised himself that he would confess for real once he returned to Korea. didn't he already? About 20 chapters ago, that is. Anyway, back to the present. Since Eunkyum had already started bearing his heart, it was Jihyuk's turn to do the same. Jihyuk told Eunkyum how he missed him so much and couldn't stop thinking about him, especially since his phone met an unfortunate end and Eunkyum isn't replying and answering his calls. Plus, they didn't precisely part in all smiles and giggles. All Jihyuk wanted to do then was to get back to Eunkyum as soon as he could. Long story short, Jihyuk finally confessed his feelings after waiting for days. Again, at least, this time, Eunkyum is taking Jihyuk's confession as the truth. He slides his hands to Jihyuk's back to hug him back and even admits that the feelings are mutual. All those anxieties and worries they had in the last couple of days are just them being awkward about letting the other know what they felt. See, communication is the key. If they had been honest from the beginning, none of this drama would have ended. The next day, Eunkyum woke up to the sound of rain from outside. He wanted to get up and see what time it was, but Jihyuk was behind him, grabbing him to stop him from getting up. It was Saturday, and there was no need for Eunkyum to get up early, especially since his fever had just managed to go down. Is it just me, or are they only doing it on Friday nights? It feels like they can always sleep in the next day whenever they do. Anyway, they have finally confessed to each other and are officially dating. They're now more honest in their affections. Eunkyum turned his body to hug Jihyuk back, then suggested they sleep some more and head out later. Considering the weather, Jihyuk wasn't all for the idea at first, but the moment that Eunkyum hesitantly said that he just wanted to hang out with Jihyuk outside, the latter had a 180-degree turn. Although he didn't say anything, the way Jihyuk got flustered and jolted up says it all. Anyone will immediately agree if one gets asked by his first love for a date. Later that day, Eunkyum and Jihyuk found themselves in the theater, about to choose a movie to watch. After much deliberation, they decided on the movie sequel of a title that both Yuna and Yunho liked, and one that Jihyuk had watched with them before while Eunkyum was asleep. Despite being a Saturday, the theater was empty when they got inside, and they had the area to themselves. However, this also meant that they could be more affectionate with each other in a public place, like eating the crumbs off the other's face. Eunkyum confessed then that he didn't like Jihyuk at first, but then Jihyuk admitted that he liked Eunkyum, so Eunkyum wanted to mess with him out of spite. At the same time, Eunkyum is also starting to get confused with his feelings. After all, it's the first time someone has treated him that way, so he's worried that Jihyuk has ulterior motives and decided not to take his confession seriously. It's what happens when you only go out with toxic jerks. Still, Jihyuk persisted in wooing Eunkyum, and Eunkyum couldn't help himself fall in love and crave Jihyuk for real in the end. Eunkyum feels terrible for being selfish and treating Jihyuk like he did this whole time, but Jihyuk doesn't blame him. If anything, he took the blame himself for everything that's happened. It feels like he's just being sarcastic. However, after the movie, the two were being so lovey-dovey and cringy in the hallway before they decided to get lunch. Tough luck. The weather just turned worse. The umbrella they had is just useless. Soon after, they were back at Jihyuk's car, drenched in rainwater. Lady Luck is in it for them. They wanted their first date as an official couple, but nothing seemed right. Perhaps the only good thing that came out of this is how Eunkyum realized how deeply he was falling for Jihyuk, the guy who is probably so tired from all the traveling abroad and exercise that they did the night before. And yet here he is, worrying and making Eunkyum his priority every step of the way. Not wanting to go home and end the date, Eunkyum told Jihyuk they should return to Jihyuk's and continue their date there. So he says, but we all know what they'll do when they arrive. As expected, Jihyuk agreed without a fuss. Safe to say, their first date failed. Still, Eunkyum felt happy. Later that evening, while chilling in the living room, the mysterious phone call that Eunkyum had received before finally came to light. Jihyuk's coworker seemed so clumsy that he even made his phone number look like a scammer to others. I have no idea how that happened, but it's still funny. When Eunkyum asked what Jihyuk would do about his broken phone, Jihyuk said he didn't care. However, his only regret is losing the photo they took together. That's to say, the photo that Jihyuk tricked Eunkyum into taking. I had to admit, it was indeed a cute one. It's always the stolen shots that turn out great. Anyway, Eunkyum promised that they could take another one later. After that, they shared another kiss and started teasing and tickling each other. With the rain still in full swing, Eunkyum whined how hard it would be to get home the next day if the weather stayed the same. Jihyuk offered for Eunkyum to stay with him if that's the case, and Eunkyum happily agreed. Their date may not have gone how they wanted, but at the end of the day, going on a date is just spending time together, which is precisely what they are doing now. Perhaps it was a blessing in disguise that Eunkyum couldn't return to his place that night. As it turns out, a suspicious man knocked at his door that night. This situation looks ominous, but let's leave that for later. Come workday morning, Eunkyum was playfully trying to wake Jihyuk up so they could get ready to work. Well, that was the idea, as Eunkyum tried to kiss, bite, and tickle Jihyuk. But Jihyuk isn't ticklish at all. And so when he turned the tables, Eunkyum was on the losing end instead. Well, not really, but you get what I mean. It wasn't planned, but Eunkyum brought in more personal items at Jihyuk's place since he always spends time there, eventually living together. While Eunkyum was getting ready, Jihyuk suddenly came up behind him and gave him a gift. It was a watch that matched what Jihyuk was already using. They're officially a couple now, so there's nothing weird if they have matching items. Anyway, the cringy lovey-dovey scenes are exclusive outside the office premises. Jihyuk acts cold and distant while working, so one would think the one who always clings like a puppy to Eunkyum is a different person. Eunkyum finds their situation exciting and is happy about it. The evening came, and the two had dinner with Hae-jun in a restaurant. They explained to the unsuspecting Hae-jun that the reason Jihyuk came looking for Eunkyum the other night and at such a late hour was work-related, and Hae-jun believed every bit of it. Well, Hae-jun and Eunkyum are not friends for nothing. Jihyuk was forced to come, but he still did his part and was civil as his jealous ass allows. That is, Eunkyum wanted to treat Hae-jun to dinner for his help the other night. Although, of course, to Hae-jun, it was nothing since they're friends, and it's not like it's the first time it happened. Hae-jun was acting like he usually does with Eunkyum and was touchy. This, of course, didn't sit well with Jihyuk. He immediately pulled Eunkyum away from Hae-jun. Jihyuk commented on how Hae-jun's treatment of Eunkyum seems inappropriate between friends. Hae-jun explains that it's just because he treats Eunkyum like his little brother, although there were times that people would often ask them if they were dating because of their closeness. Hae-jun sounded like he already suspects their actual relationship and is teasing them. Jihyuk was seething at what Hae-jun said, but it's not like he can say anything. As he tried to think of happy thoughts to calm himself down, he reached for Eunkyum's hand under the table so Hae-jun wouldn't notice. Perhaps to feel assurance since he's feeling insecure. Eunkyum found Jihyuk's jealousy and reaction adorable and held Jihyuk's hand, although not for long since their hands would still be visible to the people behind them. Once Hae-jun got home that night, he tried calling Eunkyum to ensure he got home safely. Instead of Eunkyum, however, Jihyuk answered the call, making Hae-jun conclude that they were still together. When Jihyuk confirmed they were together, he immediately hung up on Hae-jun. He'd have had a feat if only Hae-jun knew precisely why they were still together past bedtime. Eunkyum is helping Jihyuk out, and it was because Eunkyum found Jihyuk's act of jealousy earlier adorable. However, that's just for Eunkyum to know. Then again, this kind of help was just the beginning. As Eunkyum's actions got Jihyuk into a good mood, Jihyuk tried to return the favor, which proved to be effective. And not long after, they started getting into some more action. They barely stopped or took breaks, and Jihyuk doesn't look like he'll be stopping anytime soon. As for Eunkyum, he's starting to feel exhausted, although he feels good, if he is to be honest. Jihyuk's unusual talk turned to saying things like he wants to stay with Eunkyum all day and do some couple exercises until they fall asleep, after which they'll wake up to do it all over again so long that Eunkyum starts feeling weird. Eunkyum wanted to go to the bathroom for a moment, but Jihyuk didn't let him. And that was when Eunkyum ended up ruining the bedsheets. That night, Jihyuk was extra intense to the point of exhaustion. Eunkyum immediately fell asleep after their activity. In Jihyuk's defense, it was because Eunkyum was also being more proactive. This is probably because Eunkyum worries that Jihyuk might get the wrong impression about him and Hae-jun. Eunkyum, however, had Jihyuk's complete trust, and there's no way he'll ever suspect Eunkyum of cheating. However, he couldn't say that he trusts Hae-jun just yet. That's to say, Jihyuk doesn't like anyone else touching Eunkyum, even if it's a close friend or a colleague. Later that night, Eunkyum woke up feeling so hot and stuffy. He was sleeping beside the half-naked Jihyuk, clinging to him so much he almost couldn't breathe. Eunkyum sat up, seeing that he had clothes on, but was horrified upon learning that he was only wearing half of it. He checks on Jihyuk and finds the other half of clothes on him. Anyway, Eunkyum noticed that they were sleeping in a different room now. That's when he remembered how he had ruined the sheets on Jihyuk's bed earlier that night when they were doing it. So, of course, Jihyuk had to move into a different room. After Eunkyum drank a glass of water, he returned to Jihyuk's original room and looked for his phone. He was checking on Hae-jun's message when he suddenly got a call from an unidentified number. Eunkyum answers the call, curious about who it is that's calling him at such an hour. There was silence at first. Perhaps the caller didn't expect that Eunkyum would answer himself. It turns out it was the shameless, toxic ex-boyfriend Eunkyum was kissing from Chapter 1. Undoubtedly, he's also the suspicious man who previously knocked on Eunkyum's door. This guy even has the gall to accuse Eunkyum of leeching off someone since he never seemed home. Okay, let's add a creepy stalker to his description. Poor Eunkyum hung up and seemed shaken when he realized who just called him. The first person that Eunkyum dated was his tutor, who enjoyed rough play. The second is someone much older than him, who is the same as the first, if not worse. Both are selfish jerks who were using Eunkyum for personal benefits. Poor Eunkyum only realized that not all men are like that, nor does it always have to be rough, much later. Then again, jerks in the wild are never short on stock, just like the last one Eunkyum dated, who turned out to be a cheating married man. The shameless beatard even dared to call and insult Eunkyum like that, as if Eunkyum was the one who cheated. He's not calling because he wanted to apologize. The nerve, seriously. The most concerning part is that the jerk is probably lurking around his house. And the question is why? It could be that he's trying to borrow money again. He should probably tell Jihyuk about it, but Eunkyum doesn't want to. He's worried that it'll just worry Jihyuk if he does. Geez, he's at it again. Didn't he learn his lesson about keeping things from Jihyuk only cause problems? Then again, it's his problem in the first place, so he should probably try to solve it on his own first. Eunkyum was thinking about cutting off the shameless beatard for good the next time he tried to call when Eunkyum suddenly heard a loud noise coming from the kitchen. And what do you know, Jihyuk strikes again. On his mission to make breakfast for Eunkyum, Jihyuk once again murdered and burned the poor food. Well, at least it's just the food this time and not the whole kitchen in a mess. Even though Jihyuk looks mature, there are times when he's just like an innocent little boy who's clumsy at doing things. To be exact, making something edible. Eunkyum can't help but chuckle at this side of Jihyuk. And to console the perpetrator, Eunkyum started kissing and hugging Jihyuk. Makes one wonder how he even dared to live in such a high-class place when he can't even make a simple omelet. During lunch break at work, Eunkyum showed off the twins' picture to his female coworker. He tells her about their considerable age gap and how often he got mistaken for their dad. Eunkyum had always been the oldest, so he often wondered how it'd feel to have an older sibling who was the total opposite of his female coworker, the youngest in the family. Being the oldest is probably why he'd only been dating older men so far. Eunkyum's chill conversation with his coworker stopped when shameless Mr. Park suddenly remarked about their dating. Geez, he's probably just jealous. Would there be anyone who'd date someone like him? To avoid further problems, Eunkyum and his coworker decided to leave. Unfortunately, the jerk had other plans in mind. He suddenly asked Eunkyum why he was avoiding him these days. Like duh, the last time he was polite with you, you harassed and badmouthed him in the face. The narcissistic jerk is so full of himself that everyone can see that it's just him who has a problem. Eunkyum would have preferred to be quiet and let it go, but then the jerk even started bad-mouthing Jihyuk, which in Eunkyum's book is way out of the line. And so, Eunkyum finally gave the jerk a piece of his mind, pointing out that he shouldn't involve others if he has beef with Eunkyum. Narcissistic, manipulative jerks are experts at making people feel and look like they're at fault. And that's precisely what Mr. Park did when Eunkyum finally mustered up the courage to confront him with his nasty behavior. Despite that, Eunkyum still tried to be polite as he asked the jerk what his problem with him was. Of course, the jerk accused Eunkyum of letting him take the fall for Eunkyum's mistake, even though the jerk tried to do it first in the first place. He even went further, leaning in on Eunkyum, saying that he's being accused of bullying as he grabs Eunkyum by his clothes. Before things get more severe and physical, Yoonsu and Junghoon suddenly come to the rescue. They tried to intervene by distracting the jerk as their female coworker pulled Eunkyum out of the break room. There is no need for words as their eyes say it all. Also, can we comment on how vile the senior staff of this company is? The jerk's colleague is such a good supporter. Anyway, Eunkyum is now sulking, crouched in one corner of the hallway with his colleague by his side, who is trying her best to console him. They're like a male and female version of each other, so cute. Things are not going well for Eunkyum lately, especially with those unpleasant calls from his ex and hostile narcissistic coworkers. Eunkyum doesn't know what to do, and it's taking a toll on him. Eunkyum apologizes to Yoonji for getting dragged into the situation. Yoonji reassures him that it's okay and even tells him how proud she is. She even curses at Mr. Park. Best girl. Jihyuk suddenly appeared, asked them what they were doing, and even squatted down with them. He asked Eunkyum why he looked upset. Of course, Eunkyum denied anything was wrong, and Yoojin was behind him. Seriously, the two of them are so cute. They're like grown-up Yoonho and Yoona or something. Seeing as Eunkyum didn't look like he would spill the beans, Jihyuk just let it go and told them to get up and head back to their desks. Although Eunkyum felt a little uncomfortable hiding things from Jihyuk, he did think that he did the right thing. It's wrong to tell Jihyuk everything that happened to him at work. Later that day, after work, the two were at the cafe. While Jihyuk took their orders at the counter, Eunkyum suddenly received another call from his shameless ex. Eunkyum had half a mind to answer it and started going off at him, but Jihyuk suddenly asked if he would answer. So Eunkyum dismissed it for now and told Jihyuk they should go home. But then Eunkyum's phone suddenly started going off again, and Jihyuk snatched it away this time. Although the two of them thought it was someone Eunkyum didn't want to talk to, it wasn't. This time, it was the twins who were calling. Come the weekend, Eunkyum's taking the twins to the amusement park. The cuties were so excited and energetic that it was a good thing Jihyuk was there to help him look after them. The two were just all over that Eunkyum almost fell running after them if Jihyuk didn't catch him. How ironic, Mr. Big Brother. While eating in a cafe, Jihyuk was amused as he noticed how the three siblings were so alike, appearance-wise and personality-wise. Eunkyum was telling the kids how they shouldn't get picky on food if they want to grow tall. That was when Yuna pointed out how Eunkyum doesn't eat cabbage himself. My dear, that's why your brother's short. Anyway, Eunkyum tried to defend himself by making excuses as Yunho joined in to support his sister. Well, what's a big brother got to do when the younger sibs make more sense than he does? Jihyuk was just listening to them as he tried to hold himself back from laughing at the siblings' banter. He finds the whole situation cute and amusing. While Jihyuk was distracted by the twins, Eunkyum remembered how the twins' call the other day saved him from Jihyuk's suspicion. And the twins are happy Jihyuk came along when it was just their brother they missed, so it's all good. Later, Yuna started wanting to get ice cream. But since the two of them wish for different types, Jihyuk volunteers to bring Yunho to the stand to buy what he wants while Eunkyum gets hers on another stand. While Eunkyum was buying the strawberry ice cream that Yunho wanted, she got distracted by a kitty passing by not far from where they were and tried to dash to it. She didn't notice the man walking by as she did and smacked right on his leg, making her fall. Eunkyum quickly rushes in to help his sister up. Distracted by a call, the man complained about how he was not watching his child. Given that Eunkyum is partly at fault for not noticing Yuna leaving his side, he apologizes to the other person. Nonetheless, the dude should have also been aware of his surroundings. But I guess that reaction was expected since the man turned out to be none other than the shameless jerk Mr. Park. The situation turned awkward when the two realized who each other was. The jerk also immediately concluded that Yuna was Eunkyum's kid, even though he was not married yet, given how they looked so much alike. The nerve. What's he doing there anyway? If he's there on a date, the other person probably has a few screws loose. Reading what the jerk was thinking from just his face, Eunkyum explained that Yuna was his sister with whom he had a bit of an age gap. Huh, in your face. As there isn't anything that the two of them will discuss, Mr. Park tried to leave first. As if brought by karma, it was his turn to smack right on someone. And what do you know, it was big ol' Jihyuk. Well. Despite how the jerk tried to badmouth Jihyuk on his back before, he was scared of his boss, and the situation he's currently in isn't looking good, especially after he saw the kid with Jihyuk looking very much like Eunkyum. Eunkyum explained that the little boy is also his brother, and before Mr. Park could think of another wild conclusion, Jihyuk admitted that Eunkyum and he were friends from high school, which made Mr. Park flustered. Hey, well, not exactly, but that also works. And to seal the deal, Eunkyum added that they were childhood friends, to be exact. Mr. Park remembered everything he said and did for the last few days. From the bad-mouthing and ruckus, he tried to pull in the guise of being victimized by incompetent managers and juniors. In your face. Part 2. The jerk was so distracted, wallowing on his luck, that he almost didn't notice Jihyuk approaching him and giving him a tap on his shoulder. Mr. Park was so taken aback that he thought Jihyuk was trying to hit him, which Jihyuk probably really wants to do. It was to make a point, for Yuna's sake. If a grown man like him got startled like that, what would a little girl like Yuna feel then? Taking the hint, and probably too scared to do otherwise, Mr. Park tried to be friendly and apologized to Yuna. Of course, he ran away soon after without saying anything more. Eunkyum was playing it cool after that, although Jihyuk was upset for some reason. It was already late when Eunkyum and Jihyuk returned the twins to Grandma's house. As they said their goodbyes, they promised to go to a theme park next time. Jihyuk watched them, keeping quiet even when he and Eunkyum got in his car and were about to drive back home. Eunkyum noticed how Jihyuk seemed angry about something and tried asking him about it. Instead of answering, however, Jihyuk suddenly kissed Eunkyum for a long while and made him straddle him in his driver's seat. Jihyuk then started touching and kissing Eunkyum here and there. He's making a point about how upset he is with Eunkyum, and Eunkyum has no idea where Jihyuk is coming from. That is until Jihyuk asked about being Eunkyum's boyfriend. They're at it again. I think I'm about to get hives once more. Instead of immediately explaining himself, Jihyuk continued making out with Eunkyum. As Jihyuk started to bring things a step further, Eunkyum realized what was going on and asked Jihyuk why he was angry. That was when Jihyuk said that Eunkyum was always hiding something from him. Like how Eunkyum never tells Jihyuk when people are harassing him, like how he got into a fight with Mr. Park, which surprised Eunkyum. He asked Jihyuk how he knew, but no answer was given. We might never know whether Jihyuk is hypocritical or just getting back at Eunkyum. One thing's sure, Jihyuk keeps a spy around his little lover. Eunkyum explained that it wasn't a big deal and that the others were there to help him. Of course, that didn't work. Jihyuk was upset that while other people were aware of Eunkyum's situation and actively helping him, Jihyuk was clueless. Eunkyum apologized then and added that he didn't say anything because he didn't want to worry Jihyuk. Jihyuk said that he doesn't like hearing things about Eunkyum from others or other people comforting Eunkyum instead of Jihyuk himself. Jihyuk doesn't want Eunkyum to hide things from him, as Jihyuk intends to take care of Eunkyum himself. And so Jihyuk made Eunkyum promise always to tell him about everything first. Standing up for Eunkyum and making him feel better are things that Jihyuk wants to do for him. Ain't that sweet? Again, not telling your partner things is what causes all the drama. Well, all are good if they make up without any significant problems. Despite their little exercise in the car at such a late hour, Eunkyum and Jihyuk returned to their place in one piece and even continued the activity in bed. Eunkyum woke up in the middle of the night due to Jihyuk's actions. When Eunkyum complained about how Jihyuk was hurting him by doing so, Jihyuk tried hugging him instead. He just can't get enough of Eunkyum. I'm feeling bitter about this. Eunkyum wanted to get up to get water, but Jihyuk insisted on getting it for him instead. Eunkyum remembered Jihyuk's words earlier about not wanting to hear about Eunkyum from others and about Jihyuk wishing to care for Eunkyum himself. He wondered if these things were common between couples, as he hadn't experienced those in his past relationships. Having him say that is sad. Well, at least now he's finally in a healthy relationship. When Eunkyum saw Mr. Park at work again, the latter was all cheery and friendly to him. He was so charming and encouraging that even Yoonsu, Junghoon, and Yujin suspected he probably banged his head or was sick. The three had been watching the jerk in case he did something to Eunkyum again, such lovely friends. But I smell something fishy around here. One time, Jihyuk and Eunkyum were making out in the supply room, first in the car and now in the office. These two are getting bolder by the day. After Eunkyum cut their session short, he looked like something was bothering him. But when Jihyuk asked about it, Eunkyum dismissed it. Well, there is something that's been bothering Eunkyum lately. This is in the form of his stalking, shameless ex, who just seems to get a new number repeatedly. And it's proving to be useless, simply blocking his number every time he attempts to get in touch. Eunkyum promised Jihyuk that there wouldn't be any more secrets between them. But he feels so pathetic and lame whenever he imagines telling Jihyuk about his ex, especially since the jerk turned out to be a married man with a kid, still owes Eunkyum money, and kept calling him lately even though they broke up long ago, trying to explain how Eunkyum is entirely over his ex and that Jihyuk is the only one for him now doesn't improve things. Eunkyum knows that he can't avoid telling Jihyuk about it for long, but he's worried that Jihyuk might get upset about it if he does. And that's the last thing he wants Jihyuk to feel, especially since Jihyuk seems to have a lot on his plate these days. While Jihyuk was preoccupied with the work he had brought home, Eunkyum told him he'd take a bath first. After he went upstairs, however, he didn't even make it to the bathroom. Eunkyum decided not to make Jihyuk worry, and he had to deal with his problem as soon as possible. And so, finally making up his mind on the matter, Eunkyum decided to call his ex himself and end things once and for all. The shameless jerk immediately answered when Eunkyum called, as if waiting for it all this time. But Eunkyum was cold and curt in his responses. He was straight to the point, asking what the jerk wanted from him. His ex-boyfriend wanted to talk in person as he tried to speak with Eunkyum about something. Shocker. But of course, there's no way Eunkyum would allow that when just hearing the jerk's voice is already too much for him. Eunkyum then told him not to call him ever again. The ex-boyfriend didn't even have the chance to play the victim, as Eunkyum hung up soon after. After the phone call ended, Eunkyum sat on the floor, thinking about how easy it was. And to think he was agonizing about it for days and was scared during the call. But he somehow felt relieved. Eunkyum had wanted to stop being an unlucky, pathetic fool who kept being deceived by others when he only wanted to feel happy. Now that the weight was off his shoulders, Eunkyum returned to where Jihyuk was, claiming that he didn't take the shower by himself because he wanted to take it with Jihyuk instead. All the while hoping that the relief and happiness he felt then wasn't temporary. Eunkyum had spoken too soon as, not long after, his shameless jerk of an ex-boyfriend suddenly showed up at his workplace. Previously, we witnessed how the issue with Mr. Park had been resolved effortlessly, thanks to Jihyuk. Unfortunately, Mr. Park isn't the only one that's bothering Eunkyum. Having decided to end any connection with his shameless ex once and for all, he called the lying cheater and was firm in his intention of ending everything with him. Eunkyum had thought that was enough, but an unexpected visitor suddenly appeared before him the following day. Is this the beginning of another drama? Let's soon find out. Going back to the morning before work started, Eunkyum and Jihyuk were yet again being sneaky as they tried to enter their company's building separately. It might be a bit of a hassle, but Eunkyum admits that he's also enjoying the thrill of dating a coworker secretly. And it's so sweet that Jihyuk always makes Eunkyum go up first. Eunkyum was thinking about inviting or making Jihyuk dinner later as he sat at his desk when he suddenly received a message from someone. The message immediately got him up from his chair. And yes, it was from his ex, who found himself in the lobby of the company building, clearly telling Eunkyum to come down and meet him if Eunkyum didn't want him to cause a scene. Eunkyum had no choice but to hurriedly meet the jerk at the lobby. As expected from a bare-faced ex, he was full of himself when Eunkyum appeared before him. He commented how he had always known that Eunkyum worked for a good company, although he never expected it to be that good. And it's thanks to that you had a convenient cash cow for so long. Eunkyum didn't say anything in response. However, he started getting conscious of the stares they were receiving from other employees coming in. And so Eunkyum dragged the jerk into a deserted area outside the building. Of course, the shameless jerk thinks that Eunkyum only did that because he's still into him and wants to be alone with him. Yeah, right, and pigs fly. He suddenly hugged Eunkyum from behind and told him he missed, obviously wanting to return with Eunkyum like before. Eunkyum resisted and even called his ex a psycho. And that's just saying it mildly. Although I agree. The name-calling, however, seemed to have made the jerk snap that Eunkyum found himself violently pushed into the wall. He then commented how Eunkyum is becoming brave for even thinking of calling him that. Not to mention he even ignored the jerk's calls and messages to the point that he had no choice but to go to Eunkyum's workplace to get a hold of Eunkyum. I can imagine how toxic this relationship was. Anyway, Eunkyum tried to fight back, asking the jerk again what he came for, pointing out how he's already married with a kid. The statement made his ex snap again. And this time, Eunkyum found himself shoved to the ground, his hair pulled. The shameless jerk turned the table against Eunkyum, accusing him of being equally at fault since it was with him that the jerk had cheated with. Be that as it may, Eunkyum broke it off as soon as he found out the jerk was already hitched. How dare he say that? Where is Jihyuk when you need him? Someone needs a good beating here. Eunkyum once again asked what the jerk came there for and if he was just in for money. He responded that he doesn't just want money. So he is, in fact, in it for the money. The jerk also showed up because he missed Eunkyum and got divorced. And Eunkyum is partly to be blamed. And what do you know? It seems like he's also looking for a roommate to freeload with. The jerk then threatened Eunkyum that he wouldn't get angry if Eunkyum didn't go against him. And so, they should meet at Eunkyum's place later that night. That is if Eunkyum doesn't want to lose his job. So he just leveled up from being a stalker to a blackmailer. I feel so sorry for his daughter. No one deserves to have a father like this. And as if that wasn't enough threats, he even dragged Jihyuk. He was telling Eunkyum not to let that guy find out unless he wanted to ruin his boyfriend's career. When the jerk finally left, all Eunkyum could do was silent cry in frustration at how messed up this situation he had gotten himself into. Not long after, Eunkyum returned to the office. Hyujin was immediately onto him, asking him where he had been. As an excuse, Eunkyum produced takeout coffee and told her he bought coffee for them. Jihyuk suddenly showed up then, making Eunkyum flinch. He tried to act nonchalant and tried to offer Jihyuk coffee instead. Jihyuk, however, was observant when it comes to Eunkyum and asked him what had happened to his hands. A beatard appeared when you weren't on guard duty. That's what happened. As soon as Jihyuk pointed out Eunkyum's injuries, Hyujin and Hyunsu were onto Eunkyum. Everyone was very concerned about the scratches on his hands. Eunkyum, of course, quickly made an excuse for tripping when he was on his way to get the coffee. He tried to lighten the mood by saying how it'd be a disaster if it happened when he was on his way back. Jihyuk asked for some band-aids from Hyujin and then told Eunkyum to see him for a bit, to which Eunkyum had no choice but to comply. And so, the two of them returned to their little corner of the supply room where Jihyuk tended to Eunkyum's injuries. Jihyuk asked Eunkyum again if he had just fallen and not because he was hiding something from him. Jihyuk clearly didn't believe Eunkyum's excuse, although he also wanted Eunkyum to come clean himself. After all, Eunkyum already promised not to hide things. Eunkyum remembered that promise, but he was genuinely worried about getting Jihyuk into trouble because of him. Even though it's been a while since he broke up with his ex, the jerk's influence over Eunkyum is significant, and it's affecting Eunkyum's judgment. In the end, Eunkyum still denied that anything was wrong. He sweetly assured Jihyuk, who told Eunkyum to send him on a coffee errand next time instead, which Eunkyum obviously denied. Who makes their boss go on a coffee errand anyway? Anyway, determined not to get Jihyuk involved, Eunkyum told him he had plans with Haejun and some friends later that night, and that Eunkyum had to return to his place before heading back to Jihyuk's. Dear all, Jihyuk didn't look like he suspected anything and just became clingy as he conceded. Eunkyum, on the other hand, worries that Jihyuk will feel disappointed or betrayed once he finds out whom he will meet later. Why would he? It's not like Eunkyum is going behind his boyfriend's back to meet with his ex, who seemed to be into him for some reason. Oh, wait, he is. More than Jihyuk being disappointed with him, he's more afraid of hurting Jihyuk. Well, aren't you already hurting him by hiding things from him in the first place? Later that evening, Eunkyum did show up in front of his unit building. The jerk was there, of course, diligently waiting for Eunkyum outside. Since Eunkyum changed his door number, he couldn't get inside Eunkyum's place. The shameless jerk had the nerve to act like everything would return to the way it was before just because Eunkyum showed up as he told him to. But apparently, Eunkyum had other ideas. Eunkyum declared that he's moving out of his unit soon, which won't take long since he doesn't have that much stuff anyway. Not only that, he's also going to change his number. The point is, although he did come to meet the jerk, it's going to be the last time ever. The jerk tried to wiggle himself in, but Eunkyum didn't let him. Eunkyum bravely told his ex to go through with his threats, that he doesn't care if everyone finds out about their relationship or if he loses his job. After all, Eunkyum is so done being controlled by someone like him. Little Eunkyum is finally standing up for himself. Now, this is the Eunkyum that we all wanted to see. but that's just us. The jerk, of course, didn't like what Eunkyum just said. He grabbed Eunkyum by his collar and dragged him to a corner. He said things like he thought Eunkyum would listen to him if he were easy. He should just have done things his way from the start. Once again, he pushed Eunkyum to the ground and even dared to ask Eunkyum what he meant by someone like him. Despite knowing the consequences, Eunkyum didn't back down and courageously told the bully how he's a lowlife who gets off and gets what he wants from threatening people. That he is. It's no wonder his wife divorced him, and he even tried dragging Eunkyum to his level. As expected, the jerk didn't like Eunkyum's response, and he started getting more violent and verbally and physically abusive. But even then, Eunkyum tried to resist the jerk, not even when he started slapping and beating poor Eunkyum. As the jerk was busy with Eunkyum, he didn't notice the car that pulled not far from where they were nor the arrival of the man who stood right behind him. But Eunkyum did, and all he could think about is how he hated showing Jihyuk his pathetic side like this. Now, this is getting more interesting. The jerk looked up behind him and saw who Eunkyum was looking at. At first, the jerk thought that Eunkyum had told Jihyuk about him and that they were together coming there. That wasn't the case, as Jihyuk had come there alone, although he had hoped otherwise. Eunkyum immediately tried to explain to Jihyuk about what had happened. Although, before he could, the jerk was already on the ground after Jihyuk punched him. Eunkyum tried to stop Jihyuk from his assault but was ignored. Jihyuk continued to beat the jerk just like he did to Eunkyum earlier. Well, it's more intense since Jihyuk is using fists. Now, this is what I'm talking about, Mr. Guard Dog. As the jerk attempts to stop Jihyuk's assault, he exclaims how Jihyuk can't just start beating someone up. Then why was Eunkyum subjected to the same treatment earlier? Jihyuk paused for a bit after the jerk said that, but it's only to tell him that if it's compensation money he wants, then Jihyuk can give it to him. Therefore, he should make it worthwhile for Jihyuk in return, even if it meant the jerk would be bedridden afterward. Jihyuk would have continued beating the living lights out of the jerk, but Eunkyum finally managed to stop him this time before things got out of hand. He promised that he'd explain to Jihyuk what happened. Whether it was Eunkyum's earnest pleading or his beaten-up face, Jihyuk gave in without saying anything. He just made Eunkyum choose between returning to Eunkyum's place or his. Of course, Eunkyum chooses to go back with Jihyuk, and just like that, Jihyuk grabbed Eunkyum's wrist and left the area without saying anything more. Just imagine how awkward the ride home would have been in Jihyuk's car, especially for Eunkyum. As soon as they got home, Eunkyum tried to explain himself, apologizing to Jihyuk for not telling him anything. He explained that the jerk was his ex, who tried contacting him out of the blue. Jihyuk suddenly hugged Eunkyum as he let him continue to explain what happened. Eunkyum said he tried to deal with it by telling his ex off, and not to bother him anymore, but the jerk suddenly appeared at the company. So Eunkyum decided to meet him one last time and even told him that he was moving out of his place. As Eunkyum tried to explain everything, Jihyuk rubbed and groped him. It's the only way he can show his frustration and upset with Eunkyum without getting angry. And Eunkyum probably understands that as well, so he just let him. Well, he did look like he was enjoying it anyway. Eunkyum added that he did want to tell Jihyuk about it all, but there's a reason he couldn't. Jihyuk then admitted how he already knew that the reason was because Eunkyum couldn't bring himself to admit to Jihyuk how he dated a married man with a kid. A revelation that surprised Eunkyum. Jihyuk had already suspected that Eunkyum was hiding things from him, and since Eunkyum wouldn't admit anything, Jihyuk had to take matters into his own hands. This is an invasion of privacy right here, but we can let it slide since it was for a good cause. Suddenly Jihyuk pushed and pinned Eunkyum to the couch, letting the latter know how upset he is with him. Although, in all fairness, he still tries to be gentle, unlike some low-life prick who immediately becomes violent at the slightest sign of things not going his way. Eunkyum's lies had kept piling up. And if Jihyuk hadn't arrived on time, Eunkyum would probably lie again about what happened to his face. Jihyuk pointed out how, as Eunkyum's boyfriend, he had the right to know about things like this. Jihyuk was upset that Eunkyum would rather suffer alone than tell him and share the burden. When Eunkyum didn't say anything in response, Jihyuk released Eunkyum and tried to leave. But Eunkyum quickly stopped him by holding onto Jihyuk's arm, only to hesitate once again and make Jihyuk try to leave yet again. And that was when Eunkyum admitted that he only did that because he felt so pathetic. Whether it was at work or his personal life, he's a mess and always keeps getting into trouble. Eunkyum added that he's scared Jihyuk will be disappointed with him when his pride is already wounded. Plus, what if, by telling Jihyuk, he gets him into trouble, too? That's the last thing Eunkyum will ever want. Well, that's a typical Yuk for you, which drives seems crazy every time. Jihyuk was no exception. Instead of getting angry, however, Jihyuk just started making out with Eunkyum again as the latter tried to apologize again and again. Jihyuk then brought Eunkyum to their bedroom, where he would make Eunkyum show him how sorry he was. In the guise of punishment, they started doing more intense things than usual. And instead of the usual dirty talks, Jihyuk was telling Eunkyum off, saying stuff like there's no way Jihyuk would ever be disappointed in Eunkyum because he knows how a good boy he is. Jihyuk's little good boy. And so, Jihyuk made Eunkyum promise again to trust him and never lie for Jihyuk's gain. Jihyuk mumbled that he wanted to just keep Eunkyum to himself since everyone kept on bullying him. In return, Jihyuk promised to get rid of the ex for good. Well, this is strike 2 for Eunkyum. Although I feel that Jihyuk will let it slide, even with how often Eunkyum breaks his promise. It's safe to say that their method of making up is going well, although it was far from over. After finishing a round, Jihyuk suddenly hugged Eunkyum and regrets getting angry at him when Eunkyum is obviously a sweetheart. Jihyuk admitted that he snapped earlier because he was so jealous, simply because the jerk was Eunkyum's ex-boyfriend. And the fact that Eunkyum kept hiding things from him didn't help. Jihyuk also apologized for not moving sooner, even though he knew about Eunkyum's situation. It was only because he wanted Eunkyum to tell him himself. That is, for Eunkyum to always tell Jihyuk everything first and to rely only on him. This dude smells a red flag this late in the game. For what it's worth, though, Jihyuk's by far the most decent of Eunkyum's relationships. Jihyuk's words seemed to have touched Eunkyum, and he promised Jihyuk that's what he'll do from then on. All he had now for Jihyuk was love and trust. And with that, they finally made up, sealed by a lingering kiss and I love yous. Later, after a very long and good bath, the two are now in their comfortable clothes, ready to go to bed. That is after Jihyuk once again checked if they had already treated all of Eunkyum's bruises inflicted by his ex. They then moved to bed and got comfortable, lying beside each other. Eunkyum honestly admitted that he likes sleeping with Jihyuk, literally, although the latter had other thoughts and tried teasing him. Eunkyum also admitted how all the guys he had dated before were jerks. When their parents died a few years back, the twins were babies and he was still studying. Eunkyum was devastated and scared of the responsibilities that was suddenly shoved at him. He needed someone to rely on and give him the love he needed. That was when he met that shameless jerk ex of his, and the two of them started dating. The jerk was toxic, but there were times when he was excellent. Eunkyum had thought all along that that's just how love is. Well, it's times like this when you can't help feeling bad for a character you were roasting repeatedly. Catching himself, Eunkyum felt embarrassed for suddenly sharing something that sounded like an excuse. Jihyuk, however, did not think that. He felt sad that he couldn't be there for Eunkyum when he needed someone to rely on the most. Then again, Eunkyum wasn't thinking about it much anymore since it's been a while. What had already happened. If the two of them had met earlier, they'd have just stayed friends, and he likes how things are for them now. Jihyuk, though, didn't feel the same. He said he would have still liked Eunkyum whether they had met earlier or later. That's the power of first love for you. It was so sweet that anyone would have been disconcerted like Eunkyum. Later that night, while Eunkyum was fast asleep, Jihyuk silently got up from the bed and was with someone on the phone. Jihyuk was talking to someone about taking care of something. The person on the other line affirmed while looking at many documents regarding a man who looked like Eunkyum's ex. The person explained how the jerk has been lying low, has a history of fraud, and has much debt, and that he had handed it to them. I'm hoping he's talking about some goons or loan sharks. Am I too much? Anyway, Jihyuk instructed to have the jerk get another loan and to get the money off him, and that he doesn't care what happens after. Feeling relieved, Jihyuk smiled toward their bedroom where Eunkyum was sleeping. Look at this dude. So, he's not just a hot superior who came from money. Not long after, Eunkyum received a message from his jerk of an ex, who apologized for everything he had done and even sent him the money he had borrowed. Eunkyum was confused and couldn't help feeling surprised at the fact that of all the weirdos he had dated so far, the jerk was the first who had ever accepted his wrongdoing. Eunkyum was still fusing about what could have happened to his ex to have a 180-degree change of heart when Hyunsoo and Yujin came over to his side. They asked why he was so serious about looking at his phone and if it was from his ex, who was getting married. These busybodies are so adorable. When Eunkyum was by himself again after sending his coworkers away, he remembered how Jihyuk said he had to take matters into his own hands after Eunkyum didn't tell him anything. Eunkyum thought that Jihyuk had asked Haejin about his circumstances and decided he should be straight with Jihyuk this time. Eunkyum sent Jihyuk a message soon after, asking him to hang out after work. And of course, it's just like Jihyuk to find the message cute. He's a sucker for Eunkyum. What can we say? Later that day, the two of them are now settled in a restaurant. Eunkyum was in such high spirits as he told Jihyuk he would be treating him. Noticing his mood, Jihyuk asked if something good had happened to Eunkyum for him to do that. At first, Eunkyum tried to beat around the bush. Still, soon after, he told Jihyuk immediately that he received a message from his ex, who apologized for everything he had done and even paid the money he owed Eunkyum. Eunkyum was fusing over it, but Jihyuk just listened calmly. It's only because he knew about it before Eunkyum ever did. Eunkyum thought that the change in his ex happened because Jihyuk beat him up, and for that, he's thankful. Oh dear, if only you knew. After dinner, they were leisurely walking while having ice cream. They had an adorable argument about who was snuggling who every night, And here we are, only having our pillows beside us. Suddenly, Eunkyum said he'd start getting ready to leave his old place. He explained that since the contract to his home is about to end anyway and he still felt uneasy living there even though his ex said he wouldn't bother him again, it's about time that he did. Plus, he was far from work, and Jihyuk's was close. As Jihyuk listened, his hand that was holding Eunkyum's trembled with expectations, only to have it all crushed when Eunkyum said how he decided to move to a place near Jihyuk's. It will be a bit expensive, but he's sure he'll be able to afford a studio apartment, and they can hang out more often. Jihyuk was expecting Eunkyum to say he would move in with him instead, but that's not the case. Eunkyum quickly noticed how Jihyuk started sulking after what he said and asked him what he was on about. Instead of answering, however, Jihyuk asked Eunkyum where he had slept last week and night and where he'd probably sleep that night and a month after, all of which Eunkyum answered as Jihyuk's place, after which Jihyuk seriously asked Eunkyum to move in with him. This is the most practical thing I've seen in this series. Eunkyum was taken aback by what Jihyuk said. He had probably wanted that and thought they'd eventually get to that point someday, but he probably didn't expect Jihyuk to bring it up just like that. I, for one, thought they already moved in together long ago. Who pays for a house and does not even sleep there? Still, what Jihyuk had said once again moved Eunkyum and made him realize and feel just how much Jihyuk loved him. Without saying anything more, Eunkyum agreed. Not long after, Eunkyum found himself packing his stuff from his place. There was still a lot to pack, even though he had thought that he had already brought most of his things to Jihyuk's. Jihyuk was also there helping him, but he had stayed quiet all this time. It's all because he's upset due to the presence of one other person in the room. Haejin was also helping them pack stuff after he suddenly called Eunkyum and found out how he was packing to move from his place. All was with good intentions, but since Haejin still had yet to learn who Jihyuk was to Eunkyum, the atmosphere in the room was tense. For example, Haejin casually leaned to Eunkyum, asking why his boss, Jihyuk, was there. Jihyuk was seething at the back in jealousy as Eunkyum tried to make excuses about how the two of them were close, and Jihyuk was just nice enough to help him move. Eunkyum felt uncomfortable as he felt Jihyuk's glares at him, so he forced Haejin to go out for a while to get a breather. Haejin agreed and decided to get them drinks on his way. As soon as he left, Eunkyum went to hug the very upset and jealous Jihyuk. He was trying his best to console him, assuring him that there was nothing to be jealous of since Haejin was trying to help. Jihyuk asked why they couldn't just tell him they were dating, to which Eunkyum said they would, but not while packing. Yeah, that would have been awkward on so many levels. After the move, he promised Jihyuk to introduce him to Haejin formally. Well, Jihyuk seems like he's still not consoled. That was when he noticed a wallet, and an idea popped. Jihyuk told Eunkyum to kiss him before Haejin returned, to which Eunkyum readily agreed. The kiss turned to a full-blown make-out session, which will probably lead to something else if Haejin didn't suddenly come back for his wallet, which he forgot to bring and saw them in an awkward position, to which Eunkyum explained that it was just them fooling around. After Haejin left again, Eunkyum called out to Jihyuk for doing that on purpose so they would get caught by Haejin. Well, it failed in the end. It would have been epic if Jihyuk succeeded. Eunkyum was a bit upset, but the interrupted makeout session continued. In the end, they managed to get everything done without any mishaps. Haejin seemed to have left ahead of them, so Jihyuk was back to his usual clingy self now that only two were left. Eunkyum was saying that all that's left for them is to bring a couple of boxes to Grandma's, and the rest to Jihyuk's, which the latter quickly corrected as theirs instead. Well, Eunkyum is now finally moving in with someone. Although their relationship is still pretty new, and they still have much to learn about each other, they're both prepared for that. Eunkyum is excited about it, for one. On their way to Grandma's place to drop off some boxes of Eunkyum's stuff, Eunkyum suddenly asked Jihyuk to pull over. They were near their high school, and Eunkyum wanted to look around. It seemed like school was over, so the two were allowed to walk around their alma mater leisurely. It's been so long since they last came to the campus. Eunkyum remembered how he always got into trouble for being late and acted cute, so the teacher would let it slide. This is unlike Jihyuk, who didn't seem to have been late. Being immersed in the past, Eunkyum unconsciously mentioned Haejin, who also often got into trouble for being late because of him. However, Eunkyum caught himself, but it was already too late, and Jihyuk was pouting again. Jihyuk then asked Eunkyum what if he and Haejin were drowning. Whom would Eunkyum save first? Eunkyum was speechless but still tried to humor him. Since Haejin knows how to swim, he'll save Jihyuk, to which Jihyuk said that he also knows how to swim. That wasn't the answer Jihyuk wanted to hear. And so, to appease him, Eunkyum once again answered that he'd save Jihyuk since he was his boyfriend. If my boyfriend started acting like this, although I would find it adorable, I'd probably give him the stinky eye. Then again, I don't have one, so whatever. It's been a decade since they've been there, and many new facilities have been added. Although the waiting shed that Eunkyum used to hang out at with his friends is still there. Jihyuk said he also remembers since he used to watch Eunkyum then. Jihyuk admitted that he used to watch Eunkyum from his classroom. And since looking out the window isn't something suspicious, no one noticed. He used to watch Eunkyum being happy, which also made him happy, another red flag. But again, Eunkyum didn't seem to mind since Jihyuk's confession made him so happy that he suddenly kissed him. Eunkyum is glad they met again after a long time and were allowed to fall in love. Eunkyum was meeting his close friends and was showing them Jihyuk's picture. They commented that he was handsome and tall, which Eunkyum confirmed. They asked Eunkyum if he was the guy that Eunkyum turned down when they were still in high school. Well, they're asking him the standard questions out of concern. After all, Eunkyum did have a history of only dating jerks, more than finally finding a decent guy. However, the most shocking news that Eunkyum dropped is that the two of them have moved in together. This shows how severe Eunkyum's relationship is this time around. Haejun was also present. He felt cringe, remembering when he had dinner with Eunkyum and Jihyuk and how he had treated Eunkyum then. One of Eunkyum's friends asked what Jihyuk liked about Eunkyum, but Eunkyum said he's not so sure himself. Anyway, most of Eunkyum's friends seemed to approve of Jihyuk. Eunkyum received a message from Jihyuk, who seemed to come to pick him up. Before leaving, he told them he'd formally introduce him to them soon, so they should be ready. They acted all chill as Eunkyum left, but they were curious about Jihyuk to the point that they even spied on the window to try and catch a glimpse. In the car, Eunkyum was telling Jihyuk how his friends said that he's good looking and that he'll introduce him to them soon. Tisk, show off. One morning, Jihyuk is again on a mission to make food for Eunkyum. And once again, he failed. And, of course, the problem is not him but the ingredients he used, for example, the eggs. Eunkyum came into the kitchen and commented how Jihyuk once again managed to burn the food he was making. And although Jihyuk tried to make all of Eunkyum's favorites, the combination is questionable. Anyway, Eunkyum tried to teach Jihyuk the proper way of cooking, at least something simple like a sunny side up. Jihyuk was so adorable, looking focused on that simple dish, that Eunkyum couldn't help but suddenly kiss Jihyuk. Jihyuk took it a bit further, eventually costing them another burnt food. What did the egg ever do to you? At work, Eunkyum briefly conversed with Yujin and Hyunsu, discussing how Eunkyum seemed awkward around Jihyuk. They observed how the two had barely talked to each other these days. Eunkyum said he doesn't feel uncomfortable around Jihyuk or anything. If only these two knew what was happening between those two. Later that day, Jihyuk and Eunkyum were at the rooftop. Eunkyum told Jihyuk how their coworkers thought they had a super awkward relationship, which was good since it meant they were pretty good at hiding the truth. Eunkyum was smiling like a fool as he admitted how he had a hard time making a straight face in front of their coworkers. That was when Eunkyum noticed how Jihyuk was just staring at him with a gentle smile on his face, and admitted how he wished they weren't at work right then. Well, Jihyuk is just flirting. And although taken aback, Eunkyum returned it in kind. Eunkyum suddenly remembered the question one of his friends asked last time and suddenly asked Jihyuk what made him fall for Eunkyum. At first, Jihyuk looked like he was about to answer it, making Eunkyum anxious for some reason, but Jihyuk seemed to have changed his mind at the last minute and became mysterious. The flustered Eunkyum tried to persuade Jihyuk to spill the beans but to no avail. Well, the answer wasn't something grand. This Jihyuk, who could only smile boyishly at his first love, after all, fell in love at first sight with the ever-so-innocent and adorable Eunkyum. Not that it mattered. The most important thing is that the two of them could meet again. And they'll be together from then on with so much love between them. The end. This is the end of Eunkyum and Jihyuk's main story. But wait, there's more. On to the next part. We'll be sharing with you the special episodes of this series featuring a sneaky tiger and a gullible bunny. Literally. Well, okay, not exactly, but very close. In a small bunny village lived a short-eared bunny named Eunkyum. As cute as short-eared bunnies are, he's not popular with the villagers and is teased for it every time. But he doesn't mind the bullying and slandering. He's a hard worker who grows carrots on his farms to raise his younger siblings, Yuno and Yuna. One day, his two cute siblings brought home a kitten. It is indeed a kitten, not a cat, but of a tiger. Of course, Eunkyum was totally against keeping it at first. Whether it's a baby or not, a tiger is a tiger. How can bunnies leave with their natural predator? But since Eunkyum is a total softie not only against his siblings but also because of how cute the baby tiger is, he has no choice but to give in at the end. It is then decided that the baby tiger will live with the bunny siblings from then on. Eunkyum might have thought that he'd gone crazy for even letting that happen. But it still didn't stop him from worrying about it either, thinking that since it's still a baby, it must have been separated from its mom. And so, Eunkyum decided to help it find its mom. The next day, while the twins went out to do some errands in the forest, they left the little tiger in Eunkyum's care. When Eunkyum went into the house to feed the baby tiger some carrots, he was surprised when someone suddenly pushed him down to the floor. It turns out a tiger had been waiting for the twins to leave and finally get Eunkyum to himself. Without warning, the now full-grown tiger started kissing Eunkyum, who was afraid of getting eaten. However, when the tiger mentioned that he wanted Eunkyum to give birth to his cubs, Eunkyum's response was if it's possible to do that even between guys. It is likely in the Omega verse, which I don't think is true in this series. Anyway, the tiger, of course, was messing with Eunkyum but was still caught off guard by the response he got, which only motivated him to go further with his teasing. And so, they did the deed. Maybe not under Eunkyum's complete consent, but he still let the tiger get his way with him. That is, until Eunkyum couldn't take the tiger's stamina anymore. He had no choice but to transform into his full animal bunny form as a sign of protest. Instead of getting angry or annoyed, the tiger seemed to have found Eunkyum's tiny antic adorable. He promised Eunkyum that it's just the beginning and they'll take it slow. Well. Every night in a small hut outside the village, someone would continuously slither his way to be with Eunkyum under his bed covers. It would make Eunkyum cringe every time, but he tries to be inconspicuous in fear for his life. Although it's not like this individual does anything other than hold his hand and hug Eunkyum close. And here we are, only having our body pillows to hug every night. Oh, wait, is it just me? The following day, while the twins went for their errands, well, they're probably just out playing in the woods. They once again left the cute baby tiger in their big brother's care after so many reminders like some mom and dad leaving their kid to a babysitter while they're having a date night. It's been 2 weeks since the twins brought the baby tiger home, and it started living with the bunny siblings. They're probably the only bunnies living with their natural predator under one roof. Often, Eunkyum would leave the baby tiger in the house with a plate of carrots as he left for the marketplace in the village. Before leaving, Eunkyum would often remind the tiger to stay inside the house, never let other villagers see him, and only go when everyone's asleep at night. Eunkyum still had no idea why such a tiger would want to live with them, but he tried his best to be as accommodating as possible. He's always anxious, having no choice but to leave the tiger alone in the house, and would often try his best to get back home as early as possible. In the marketplace, Eunkyum tries to sell the carrots from his farm to earn a living. He usually doesn't get to sell anything, thanks to the shameless and pitiful Mr. Park. He's another carrot seller who would often badmouth Eunkyum and ruin his reputation with other customers. At least Eunkyum still has the bunny peddler Hyunsu, who sympathizes with Eunkyum, buys his carrots, and lets Eunkyum know about news going around the village. A tiger had been spotted roaming in their village at night. This information made Eunkyum nervous as he had an idea of how authentic this information was. Eunkyum still put it off as simple rumors to scare kids, but according to Hyunsu, paw prints have been seen up on the mountain as large as a pot. And so, Hyunsu reminded Eunkyum to be careful since he lives right under the mountain. After all, tigers are fast and stealthy. Before anyone blinked an eye, a tiger would have already attacked them. Hyunsu. You have no idea how fast and stealthy tigers can be. By evening, Eunkyum was fretting as he arrived home, still thinking about the news he had heard earlier. He couldn't help but wonder if the tiger was still inside or if he had indeed snatched some random bunny somewhere. Before he could open the door and check for himself, however, another bunny, Mr. Ha, arrived. He wanted to ask Eunkyum, as a neighbor, to lend a helping hand on his farm that month. Eunkyum, being the nice guy that he is, readily agreed. And since having a pair of hands for free is not enough, Mr. Ha shamelessly tells Eunkyum to bring some carrots for the other workers while he's at it, as if Eunkyum has a share of the profits of his farm or something. As Eunkyum pondered his predicament of being forced to give his carrots away even though he barely had enough to last them until the next harvest, someone snatched him into the house. It was the baby tiger, now humanoid, cursing at Mr. Ha and telling Eunkyum not to do what the old fart says. Since the tiger's hands are all over Eunkyum, he demands to be let go. But the tiger pointed out that why should he when he holds him all night long? And that Eunkyum is always waiting for him every time, too, while pretending to be asleep. In Eunkyum's defense, it wasn't like he was anticipating the tiger's arrival. Eunkyum couldn't sleep properly, fearing that he'd eat him. Some creatures snuggle their owners every time to check if they're good enough for a meal. Then again, Eunkyum is a different kind of meal. Every time there were just the two of them, the tiger would try to cozy up with Eunkyum and remind him how he promised to give birth to his cubs. Therefore, they need to get to work as often as they can. Again, if only this were Omega verse, how exciting would that be? Eunkyum would often think he'd much prefer if the twins brought home an ordinary wild beast and not someone from the tiger clan with a strange attachment to him. Eunkyum still fusses over the situation he found himself in, but it's not like he's totally against or dislikes it. To make matters worse, the tiger again told Eunkyum to ignore what Mr. Ha asked, promising to take the old fart by the throat and throw him somewhere in the mountain the next time he comes around. He said it, trying to be sweet and protective, but Eunkyum felt differently. Eunkyum and the tiger were in such a cozy situation when the twins got home. Eunkyum was fretting about how to explain to the twins that the kitty they brought home was, in fact, not at all a kitten and had tricked them. There was no need for the fuss since Eunkyum was the only one who knew nothing. This was evident by how protective the twins were to Jihyuk. So, once upon a time, a baby tiger approached them while the twins played in the woods. They played with the baby tiger all day, and once it was time to go home, they wanted to bring the baby tiger. At that time, the baby tiger turned into a grown man and told the twins that he wanted to be a part of their family. And thus, Chapter 1 began. The twins were, of course, scolded by Eunkyum for lying to him. They owned up for their mistake, but that didn't stop them from insisting on letting the tiger Jihyuk stay with them. Jihyuk, of course, was on their side, explaining to Eunkyum that he asked the twins, and that he does want to live together with Eunkyum. Eunkyum hesitated. It's just that unbelievable of a situation to live with a tiger in a bunny village. It felt surreal that Eunkyum couldn't help but think how Jihyuk was probably messing with him. Then again, it's not like he has any choice. Even if he refuses, it's not like Jihyuk would leave. Jihyuk said he knew that Eunkyum was only hesitating because of the other villagers, but once again, he promised to take care of them so that no one ever bothered Eunkyum. That said, there is no more reason to chase Jihyuk away, and Eunkyum was forced to accept the situation. The twins were thrilled, of course. That was their first day as an official tiger and bunny family. The next day, Eunkyum was at Mr. Ha's residence, helping to do some odd jobs here and there for free. Since Jihyuk told Eunkyum to ignore Mr. Ha's request, Eunkyum had no choice but to make an excuse so he could go out. After all, ignoring Mr. Ha's requests is hard, especially in their village since he's the wealthiest person, not to mention the longest one who had lived there. Getting on his wrong side isn't something one would want. Eunkyum barely managed to stop Jihyuk from taking care of Mr. Ha and the villagers, too, but he did, convincing Jihyuk that he needs some time to take care of. Having a tiger leave with them seems to complicate the life that Eunkyum wanted to have. After all, he wants to work hard enough to provide for the twins and leave a simple life like everybody else. Then again, even without Jihyuk, the fact that the other villagers are already ostracizing him for simply having short ears makes that life impossible. Yes, he's talking about you, asshat Mr. Park. How nice would it be if Jihyuk mauls you over? Now that's a sight. That afternoon, Eunkyum was waiting for someone in the meadow. His childhood friend, Haejun, the wolf, had especially brought him some fruits and told him to eat some for himself and not give everything to his siblings. While they were spending time together, Haejun noticed that Eunkyum was going through a lot these days. He asked Eunkyum if he would stay in the bunny village forever. Eunkyum asked what Haejun meant by his question, and Haejun pointed out how the other villagers still bullied him even after all this time. Eunkyum tried to make excuses that he was fine and had already made a friend, but Haejun didn't buy it. Instead, he offered for Eunkyum to live in his village. Haejun explained that it might sound scary, but at least in their village, they don't bully others. It's going to be hard, but Haejun is there for him. Hold on a minute. This is a smelling love triangle. As exciting as that sounds. Don't you dare, Mr. Haejun. It was already getting late when Eunkyum headed home with the leftovers of Haejun's gifts in his arms. He was thinking about his conversation with Haejun earlier in his offer, and one that Eunkyum declined. Moving to another village isn't easy. Forget about Eunkyum. He's more worried about how his siblings might feel if they move to a village where they're considered outsiders more than ever. He's not confident he can assure their safety from other bigger animals. When Eunkyum got home, he found Jihyuk playing with the kids by taking turns and getting lifted to the air. The twins excitedly welcomed their big brother and told him to ask Jihyuk to do the same for him, which Jihyuk did without Eunkyum's consent. It's a perfect excuse to hug Eunkyum, too. Jihyuk, you sneaky tiger. While having Eunkyum in his arms, however, Jihyuk suddenly started sniffing him. Without saying anything, Jihyuk stared at Eunkyum. This made Eunkyum nervous, thinking that Jihyuk wanted to eat him, literally. And so he was forced to escape Jihyuk and instead declared that they'd be having dinner. Eunkyum is already constantly on the edge, just living with natural predators. How can he even think of moving? Later that night, after Eunkyum sent the kids to bed, he organized the carrots he would keep and sell in the village the next day. After all, against his better judgment, the old fart Mr. Ha still managed to take a bunch of his carrots. Eunkyum was still in the middle of tidying up when the very wet and half-naked Jihyuk arrived. As he continued his task, Eunkyum wondered why Jihyuk was wet and worried how he might catch a cold despite being a tiger. Once again, Jihyuk wordlessly stared at Eunkyum and, without warning, started sniffing and getting all over Eunkyum to the point that they fell over the floor. Eunkyum tried to stop Jihyuk and ask him what had suddenly gotten into him. Jihyuk responded that he could still smell a wolf's scent on Eunkyum. Jihyuk was so aggressive that Eunkyum was trembling in fear. The tiger started bombarding Eunkyum's questions about the mysterious wolf. He admitted that he even crossed the lake to get a whiff of the wolf, but to no avail. Despite his fear, Eunkyum explained that the wolf did not hurt him in any way and was just a friend. That response didn't bode well with Jihyuk, and he sarcastically asked Eunkyum how he could be friends with a wolf. Well, Eunkyum is sleeping with a tiger. Why can't he be friends with a wolf? That's just racial discrimination. Don't people go to jail for that? Hypocrite Jihyuk pointed out that bunnies can't be friends with wolves, but bunnies can sleep with tigers. Eunkyum was speechless at Jihyuk's words. Jealous people are irrational. That's just how things are. Eunkyum defended that although Haejun is a wolf, he is Eunkyum's friend. Hearing Eunkyum call Haejun's name upset Jihyuk even more, as they're on a first-name basis. As he started to undress Eunkyum, Jihyuk told him that wolves couldn't be trusted and he was a danger to a bunny like Eunkyum. But Eunkyum has nothing to worry about because Jihyuk will find and kill him, so Haejun can't bother Eunkyum again. And he said it with a calm smile on his face, too. Jealous people can be irrational and psychopaths. They're hot but still can be irrational and psychopaths. All Eunkyum could do was tell Jihyuk not to do it while he sniffled and trembled in fear. Frustrated with how things had turned, Jihyuk held Eunkyum. The latter tried to stop Jihyuk, but the tiger pointed out how the bunny should be already used to it by now. After all, snuggling with each other wasn't the only thing they did every night. Jihyuk is also training Eunkyum to get used to him. Eunkyum might have struggled initially, but eventually, the short-eared bunny got used to it. Embarrassed, Eunkyum pointed out that even though he had such a reaction, that didn't mean he liked what Jihyuk was doing to him. Why does this stupid bunny always say the wrong things at the bad times? He's always digging his own grave. After hearing Eunkyum's words, Jihyuk decided that Eunkyum probably prefers something else. Well, he did struggle at first, but after he instructed Eunkyum to focus on kissing him, they eventually managed to do it. Jihyuk was so into it that he warned Eunkyum not to turn into his full bunny form again like last time suddenly. Eunkyum eventually ended up doing whatever Jihyuk asked him to do, hoping that by doing so, they'd stop doing whatever they were doing. But every time Eunkyum does something, Jihyuk asks something more ridiculous than the previous one. They only managed to stop after Jihyuk was finally satisfied himself. And just as he was about to tell Eunkyum to do it again, Eunkyum turned into his full bunny form out of exhaustion. Jihyuk tried waking Eunkyum up, but he wouldn't budge. The following day, Eunkyum woke up with his back hurting. He thought of going to work but felt so warm that he just wanted to sleep in. When Eunkyum opened his eyes, he was surprised to see his bunny paws and realized that he had probably been so exhausted that he transformed unconsciously. As he tried to remember what he had done the day before for him to get exhausted and for his bed to be warm, he suddenly noticed how he was sleeping on top of a full-grown tiger. Although the said tiger looked like it was sleeping peacefully, the little bunny couldn't help but tremble. Whenever Eunkyum sees the baby tiger, he often wonders if it is truly Jihyuk. After all, according to legends, some predators are capable of freely shape-shifting, such as turning into their human forms with their clothes on or into baby versions of their animal forms. As the baby tiger purred and licked him, Eunkyum just can't let himself believe those legends. They were all true, as now he's lying on top of a full-grown tiger Jihyuk. Remembering what had happened the night before and seeing the situation he was in at the moment, the trembling Eunkyum cursed at Jihyuk for once again lying about his true animal form. Jihyuk has big paws. Just one swat from one of those will send him to his demise. He tried to climb down of Jihyuk before he woke up. Too bad Jihyuk is already awake. He caught the animal Eunkyum in his human hands right after he transformed. But naked, might I add. After Eunkyum realized what had happened, he tried to flail around and escape Jihyuk. Jihyuk, on the other hand, sighed and asked Eunkyum if he didn't like the big version of Jihyuk. The latter explained that he only did that because he was worried that Eunkyum might get a cold. And if Eunkyum is scared of his true form, he'll never turn into that again. A declaration that confused Eunkyum. In Eunkyum's eyes, Jihyuk is one weird tiger. He's both scary and sweet, like how he lost his temper last night and did whatever he wanted with Eunkyum. And yet Jihyuk also worried about Eunkyum's well-being. And Jihyuk is willing to give up a part of him if only it puts Eunkyum at ease. Suddenly, the twins and Jihyuk were whispering to themselves, which made Eunkyum curious. They planned to have Eunkyum stay home that day and not go to work. Jihyuk even offered to bring Eunkyum whatever he needed and go to work instead of Eunkyum himself. A predator selling carrots. That's a fascinating sight to see. Although Jihyuk failed to convince Eunkyum, the power of the twins' charms didn't fail them. However, it was not a 100% co. Not being able to say no to his siblings, who wanted to bring Eunkyum somewhere because they missed him a lot, Eunkyum promised to only work until noon to spend more time with them. Jihyuk is happy about Eunkyum's promise, although he wouldn't want Eunkyum to work too much if it were up to him. After all, Eunkyum is still going to have his baby tiger soon. Somewhere along the way, Eunkyum gave up Jihyuk's delusions and taught himself to humor him whenever he talks nonsense like this. As Eunkyum sat in his usual spot in the marketplace to sell his carrots, he couldn't help wondering about Jihyuk's intentions for him. Jihyuk often acts weird that Eunkyum wonders if he'll get kicked out of his tiger village, and he seems pretty serious about all his threats and confessions, which makes the whole liking Eunkyum thing unbelievable. After all, Eunkyum was sure he'd never met any tiger before Jihyuk came along. Suddenly, Eunkyum's attention was caught by Mr. Park's boastings of how his carrots give the strength of a tiger and how addicting they are. As if lying through his teeth wasn't enough, he suddenly pulled Eunkyum into his monologue, claiming that Eunkyum's carrots are terrible, pointing out how he has stubby little ears that look like rats. Eunkyum tried to ignore Mr. Park's words, who continued to slander Eunkyum's ears and spread ridiculous claims against his carrots, as if the two could be related. But the loudmouth slandering Mr. Park had to include Eunkyum's deceased parents in his web of lies, who had died from being killed by wild beasts. They claimed they couldn't hear the beasts' footsteps because they also had short ears, and that Eunkyum had to care for his siblings after their deaths. This shameless lying beatard. What exactly is the point of him saying all those things? Even a child has better manners than him. Eunkyum also thought that the beatard had gone too far, because, the next thing we knew, Eunkyum was already in front of Mr. Park and just flat out told him that his parents don't have short ears. Flustered that Eunkyum would ever dare to speak up for himself, Mr. Park defamed Eunkyum's ancestors and claimed they were probably the ones from whom Eunkyum got the short ears. Not letting it slide anymore, Eunkyum accused the beatard that he's just bullying Eunkyum because he doesn't want him to sell his carrots. And it's pathetic and cruel to do to someone. Having been called out directly for his shameless actions, Mr. Park tried to cover his embarrassment by acting aggressively towards Eunkyum. But Eunkyum didn't care. Eunkyum will let all the insults and bullying regarding his ears slide and not say or do anything in return. But it's a different story if somebody slanders his family. Eunkyum's words hit bullseye because Mr. Park turned red and couldn't say anything anymore to defend himself, so he resorted to violence. Mr. Park slapped Eunkyum right in front of those many people. And since that wasn't enough, he also drags the twins into the discussions, saying how Eunkyum can't even take care of them, and yet he's telling him not to talk about them. He claims he's just worried about Eunkyum, yet he's being turned into the bad guy. Well, duh. He's the reason why Eunkyum couldn't sell his carrots and earn for the kids. This narcissistic beatard who probably doesn't own a mirror, and he dares to get mad. Having had enough of his slanders and accusations, Eunkyum shoved the crates holding the beatard's carrots, as if summoning all the courage he had in his body. Eunkyum continued to talk and fight back even after the slanderer tried to grab and hurt Eunkyum once again. The beatard shoved Eunkyum to the ground, saying things like he's not picking on him because they both sell carrots. After all, who would want to buy something from an orphan with short ears? He claims that everyone in the village hates Eunkyum and is the only one who doesn't see it. He even had the nerve of saying that he wished the tiger would take Eunkyum away. He already did in ways the beatard couldn't even imagine. Plus, come on, why does having short ears equate to being hated? Is it just this beatard who's stupid, or was stupidity a widespread disease that affected those living inside the village? It's the latter, because the worst part of this event is that, even though some villagers tried to calm down the beatard and get him away from Eunkyum, none of the remaining villagers did anything to deny his claims or help Eunkyum up. Instead, they just stared at him and whispered things about him. Then again, it's not like it's the first time this happened to Eunkyum. That's just how hard it is to be a breadwinner. Days will come when he feels so useless and depressed, but that doesn't mean he should dwell on it. If he can't sell his carrots that day, he'll try again tomorrow and the next one after that. He'll be able to eat dinner and spend time with the kids when he gets home, and that's enough for him to feel better. As Eunkyum continued on his way home, he suddenly noticed a baby tiger seated on a boulder and looked like he was searching for someone despite being soaked in the rain. As soon as Jihyuk saw Eunkyum, he ran to him. Eunkyum asked what Jihyuk was doing there when he told him to stay home since someone might see him. Jihyuk immediately transformed, apologized, and explained that he got worried about Eunkyum because it suddenly started to rain. Jihyuk assured Eunkyum that nobody saw him and, out of nowhere, produced a po that he used to cover Eunkyum since he might catch a cold. He then took the leftover carrots that Eunkyum was holding and urged him to go home with him. Eunkyum suddenly started crying, and Jihyuk kissed him. As Eunkyum continued to sob, Jihyuk asked who, why, and what made Eunkyum act like that so he could take care of them. Before spilling the beans and telling on Mr. Park for teasing Eunkyum about his ears, Eunkyum expressed his regret of going to the village that day instead of just staying with Jihyuk and the kids at home, like how they had wanted him to do in the first place. Eunkyum let himself go as he clutched onto Jihyuk as if he's his final solace. Jihyuk, in return, tried to calm him down by saying that his ears were cute and even shorter than Eunkyum's. It wasn't the first time someone made fun of Eunkyum's ears, nor was it the worst. And yet, for some reason, he felt so vulnerable and weak. Perhaps it's because it was raining, or maybe because someone came all the way to walk him home despite the weather. Jihyuk is a tiger who wants to live with Eunkyum, a bunny. He firmly believes that Eunkyum can give him a baby tiger someday. Eunkyum can't tell if Jihyuk likes him, at least when they're making out under the rain. Eunkyum wants to believe that Jihyuk's feelings are real. One drizzling morning, a butt-naked Jihyuk woke up beside an equally butt-naked, still sleeping Eunkyum. Wanting to continue what they were doing the night before while Eunkyum was asleep, Jihyuk started to have his way with Eunkyum until the latter woke up. It's been a week since Eunkyum last came to the market, He had never imagined that it could be okay not to work. As he did, even after the rain stopped, he still didn't go to the village. Eunkyum likes staying at home, especially since Jihyuk has been helping around the house by bringing water and picking fruits for their family. Eunkyum feels like if the two of them started farming together, they would do well. That morning, Yoonho was the first to greet Eunkyum, who had asked his older brother why he and Jihyuk didn't sleep in the same room as he and Yoonho. The answer is not meant for such innocent ears to hear yet. And so Eunkyum had to make an excuse that the room was too small for the four of them to use. This was coming from the person reprimanding his siblings about lying. Anyway, feeling in the mood now that the rain had finally stopped, Eunkyum suggested they leave the house. This made the kids excited. Later that day, the four of them went to a meadow. While the twins played and hopped, Eunkyum and Jihyuk stayed back and just enjoyed the nice weather after such a long time. Then again, Jihyuk had other ideas on what they should do while the kids play. As the two finally settled, lying on the grass, Eunkyum pointed out how the twins were probably the only bunnies who had ever brought a tiger home. Jihyuk mysteriously disagrees and says that Eunkyum did the same thing long ago, surprising Eunkyum. Before Eunkyum could ask Jihyuk about it, however, Yoonho suddenly came and laid on top of his brother. He and Yoonho each offered clover leaves to Eunkyum and Jihyuk to eat, which the two graciously accepted. Once upon a time, a cute baby tiger had wandered too far from his neighborhood. He reflected on his situation, knowing that he was not supposed to have gone to the area of another species. As he was thinking of returning, someone suddenly grabbed his tiny body. In his human form, a young bunny had excitedly mistaken the baby tiger for a kitten. The young bunny brought the baby tiger to his home and got some carrots to share. However, the young bunny seemed satisfied by seeing the kitten eat everything himself. The baby tiger didn't want to but eventually gave in and started munching on the raw carrots. As the baby tiger is already on his second carrot, Eunkyum gets called by his mother. Hurriedly, Eunkyum hid the baby tiger under his blanket and told him not to come out. The young bunny greeted his parents, who had just arrived from the market, and brought him some strawberries. All the young bunny's misunderstanding caused the baby tiger to hide inside a bunny family's humble house. The young Eunkyum was so happy that the baby tiger pretended to be a cat for a bit just for him. And so, the following day, when Eunkyum's parents go to work, he plays house with the baby tiger. Since the young bunny had always wanted to have a younger brother, he decided that the baby tiger would be his brother from then on. Eunkyum was so happy to have the baby tiger around that he promised to play with him every day and even to give the baby tiger all the strawberries he received the day before. Then, the baby tiger realized that Eunkyum had probably only played like that by himself. As if to prove this theory, a couple of young bunnies around young Eunkyum's age appeared and made fun of Eunkyum for playing by himself. Young Eunkyum tried to ignore them, but the other young bunnies kicked poor Eunkyum instead. They also started making fun of the game that Eunkyum was playing and his tiny ears. Having had enough, the baby tiger chomped on one of the bullies' hands. The baby tiger wasn't satisfied with that and even attacked the other kids soon after the three bullies ran away, traumatized by a cat. The young Eunkyum gave his tough savior a grateful hug, admitting that those kids had constantly bullied and made fun of him. From then on, the baby tiger decided to protect Eunkyum so that no one could ever make fun of him. For a moment, the baby tiger wished they could live peacefully and happily together forever. But all good things must come to an end. One night, the baby tiger heard young Eunkyum's parents talk about a tiger sighting in their area at night. A few people had spotted it, and even Mr. Choi had heard one. They worry that the tiger might attack their village if this continues. The baby tiger understood that the spotted tiger might be his family who came looking for him. After all, he's been there a while, and he had not informed his family where he was beforehand. Deciding that it's finally time to say goodbye, the baby tiger did so while young Eunkyum was sleeping and slipped out of the house. He had wanted to stay with Eunkyum more, but that may have to wait until the future. The baby tiger hadn't gone that far when he heard a crying Eunkyum come after him, demanding where he was going while leaving Eunkyum behind. The young bunny suddenly fell while he ran after the baby tiger. As Eunkyum tried to get up, a young boy helped him and scolded him for running like that, causing him to hurt himself. The baby tiger, who had turned into a young boy this time, explained to Eunkyum that he was not a cat and was, in fact, a human like Eunkyum. He said that he needed to go back home now, and Eunkyum couldn't go to his place because it was too far, and he was not supposed to be there in the first place. However, someday, once he gets older and becomes the ruler of the mountain, he promises to come to see Eunkyum again. A promise that was sealed with a peck on Eunkyum's cheek. As he sprinted away, the young boy declared for them to marry and leave together someday, leaving a confused young bunny behind. And so, the promise made under the moonlight would have been fulfilled in the distant future. As Eunkyum was doing some chores in the kitchen, he was still thinking about what Jihyuk had said about him bringing a tiger home before. It's bugging him. Yet Jihyuk keeps ignoring Eunkyum whenever he asks about it. The only thing he can remember is getting a cat home. Suddenly, Yoonho appeared behind Eunkyum, asking him to tuck her in since she couldn't sleep. While at it, Eunkyum asked Yuna if she liked Jihyuk and what she liked about him. Yuna said she likes him because he gives her piggyback rides and plays with her. The innocence of children is so beautiful, with simple wants and simple needs. Yuna added that she wants them to live together forever so Eunkyum can't kick Jihyuk out. Eunkyum assured her that he wouldn't. When Yuna asks her older brother if he likes Jihyuk, although taken aback, Eunkyum admits he does. Speaking off, Jihyuk was supposed to be just looking for fruits but hadn't returned home yet, which he seems to be doing a lot these days. Meanwhile, somewhere in the forest, Jihyuk was walking away from something when he noticed his dirty sleeve and decided to go to the lake before heading home with the pack of promised fruits in hand. Behind him, the ground seems to be drenched with blood. Now, this is interesting. Is this the tiger baring his teeth? In the village, news has been reported about how a tiger had attacked the eldest son of Mr. Ha. And although the son wasn't killed, it was said that he'd be disabled for life. What's strange is that not long ago, the second son was also attacked by a tiger. One of the older villagers commented that the attacks are Mr. Ha's karma since he's always been rude to the other villagers. Hyunsu added that everyone else in the village probably feels the same as he does. On another part of the village, the Beatard voiced his curiosity about Eunkyum not going to work for over 2 weeks now. Well, we wonder why. He said it was strange for him not to go to work when Eunkyum had siblings he had to provide for. The Beatard's friend mentioned that strange things have been happening ever since Eunkyum stopped coming to the village, too, making him conclude that perhaps Eunkyum got attacked by the tiger as well. Then again, he doesn't care. What he's sure, though, is that Eunkyum is hiding something that has been making him money. Something similar. However, no amount of slandering, rumors, and hate could ever take that from him. Meanwhile, at the back of their house, Eunkyum and Jihyuk were making out when the twins started looking and calling for them. Jihyuk laughed that it was funny how the twins immediately came looking for them when they just disappeared for a second. Jihyuk added that it makes the kids scared, to which Eunkyum teased how even tigers have something they're afraid of, such as the fate of being a parent. Since they were summoned, they have no choice but to come forward. When they saw the two, Yuno said he wanted to eat peaches. Eunkyum tried to scold Yuno for making Jihyuk go out on fruit-picking errands, although the errand runner didn't mind. Fruit picking is always better than food murdering, after all. With that settled, Yuna also asked for 3 pieces, and soon after, Jihyuk left to get them. As Eunkyum saw Jihyuk off, he couldn't help feeling a sense of déjà vu for some reason. A bit later, the Beatard can be seen sneaking around bushes as he tries to look for Eunkyum's house sneakily. As the Beatard tried to be sneaky and wonder where Eunkyum was, Yuno suddenly called out to his brother, revealing that Eunkyum was indeed home. Yuno asks for some fruit, and Eunkyum agrees to give him and Yuna an apple each before dinner. The Beatard, hearing this, wondered how Eunkyum could afford to buy fruits, making his suspicions about Eunkyum having something to hide more apparent. That was when Yuna suddenly appeared behind the Beatard and accused him of being a thief, threatening to tell on him to her brother. After all, her brother did say that people who sneak around other people's homes are thieves. Well, she's not wrong. To keep her quiet, the Beatard covered her mouth and manhandled her. It's good that Eunkyum was already looking for Yuna and came upon the scene. Safe to say, Eunkyum did not like what he saw. Eunkyum immediately took Yuna from the Beatard's hold and demanded why he was there, as if bullying Eunkyum in the market wasn't enough. The Beatard was now invading his home as well. But just like how he's always been, the Beatard turned the table to Eunkyum, saying things like, Eunkyum should be thankful because the Beatard was worried about Eunkyum, who's staying at home sulking because he was told the truth. Yes, of course, and that completely justifies sneaking around the house and hoping the owner is not home. And because he's shameless, the Beatard started looking around the place as if he had been invited to do so, spouting nonsense, things like how Eunkyum probably made money and how he should share it with his neighbors. Even if Eunkyum did come into some money, which he did, why would this Beatard ever think he'd get a taste of it? Shameless and stupid. The Beatard made his way to the kitchen and found the baskets of fruits that were meant for Eunkyum and his family. Knowing precisely what the Beatard came there to do, Eunkyum didn't hesitate to point it out to him and accuse him of wanting to steal whatever it was that he had. Of course, the Beatard denied it, even though he was already holding the basket of apples from the kitchen. He even dared to accuse Eunkyum of being greedy. Eunkyum, however, doesn't plan on getting intimidated and trampled on ever again, so he forces the Beatard to leave. Not only Yuna, but he's also scaring Yunho. How dare he, seeing as his attempt to intimidate isn't working. The Beatard agreed to leave, albeit saying that Eunkyum will get his karma for being greedy. It should be the other way around, though. The Beatard hadn't gone far, however, when Jihyuk suddenly attacked him in his baby tiger form. Eunkyum covered Yuna's eyes, not wanting her to see the attack that a tiger cub was doing to a full-grown man. I know, what the hell? The Beatard at first thought it was just a strong cat attacking him. And when he realized that it was a baby tiger, it was already too late, as Jihyuk didn't look like he'd easily let the beatard off. As the events unfold, Eunkyum once again feels like something like it had happened to him before. Cue the events from 3 chapters back. Amidst the chaos and bleeding that he sustained, the beatard concluded that Eunkyum's lack of visits to the market was related to the attacks on Mr. Ha's sons by a tiger. He probably thought that everything was under Eunkyum's orders. The beatard tried to run away while promising to get back at Eunkyum the next time he saw him, and again, Jihyuk didn't look like he would let that happen quickly. Jihyuk ran after the fleeing beatard, and Eunkyum followed him after telling the kids to go inside their room until he got back. He tries to stop Jihyuk and assure him he's fine so Jihyuk doesn't have to hurt him more than he already did. Amidst the chase, all the clues and memories came together in Eunkyum's head. He remembered when kids teased him for not having friends and how he tried to defend himself by saying that he did have a friend he promised to meet again once they grew up. All of those made him realize who Jihyuk was and made him remember the promise they made. This adorable little bunny, how can anyone dare make him cry? Back when Eunkyum was still young, an equally young baby wolf Haejun asked why Eunkyum was always alone and if he didn't have any friends. Baby Eunkyum denied this, of course, and said that he did have a friend, and although he doesn't know his name, Eunkyum's friend promised they'd see him again. Innocently excited, Haejun wanted Eunkyum to introduce him to his friends so they could play together, to which Eunkyum readily excitedly agreed. A few years later, he still thinks that the friend he made a few years ago is a cat. Eunkyum can't help but remember him whenever he sees a cat in the street. He's still waiting for the promised day to happen, which, for some reason, really made him happy the moment it was given. Years passed, but Eunkyum didn't stop longing for his kitty friend, and now they're finally reunited. Back to the present, Eunkyum came upon Jihyuk in his human form with the beatard fainted on the ground. Jihyuk assured Eunkyum that the beatard wasn't dead and was just a little hurt. After all, he just couldn't let Eunkyum be bullied like that. He then slowly walked to Eunkyum and rested his head on Eunkyum's shoulder, pleading for Eunkyum to not be afraid of him. Instead of responding, Eunkyum started to talk about the kitty he once brought home. It had dark fur and was so strong that it had no problem chasing Eunkyum's bullies away. The kitty promised to see each other again, and they did. Eunkyum apologized to Jihyuk for not recognizing him sooner and started crying again. Feeling guilty, Eunkyum tried to explain himself, like he hadn't forgotten their promise before and thought Jihyuk was a cat back then. But of course, there was no need for that because Jihyuk could not get angry at him. The most important thing is that the promised day has finally come, with the promised person who had been waiting by him to remember all this time. The following day, Eunkyum was the first to wake up and immediately stared at the sleeping Jihyuk beside him. He started mumbling about how he couldn't believe that Jihyuk wasn't a cat back then since he was so tiny. Jihyuk's small ears caught Eunkyum's attention, and he attempted to touch it but changed his mind, afraid that he might wake Jihyuk up. Although, there was no need for that since Jihyuk had already been awake all this time. Changing the topic, Eunkyum voiced out his concern about the beatard Mr. Park telling on them to everyone in the village, but Jihyuk assured him that there was no need to worry about it. He also said it's about time that he heads to the town. Jihyuk was on his way to the village with Eunkyum in tow. He's worried that Jihyuk is going to hurt someone, not to mention that the villagers would freak out after seeing Jihyuk, so Eunkyum wanted to try and talk to them first. And so, Jihyuk sincerely asked Eunkyum what he wanted him to do. Eunkyum admitted that he didn't like the other villagers. They've been bullying him all this time, and some of them are just beatards. But he also has good memories in the village, the friends he made that comforted him, and his parents who brought him up. And he met Jihyuk in the town as well. All Eunkyum wanted was for the 4 of them to live together like they are now. Jihyuk smiled and told Eunkyum that nothing was more important to him than what Eunkyum wanted, and so Eunkyum shouldn't worry and trust him. In the village, a beaten-up Mr. Ha and Mr. Park and other villagers were in a kowtow in front of the lordy Jihyuk and stunned Eunkyum. They were trying to apologize for all the wrongdoings that they had done to Eunkyum by far. Eunkyum couldn't believe how easy it had been to subdue everyone else, that there was no point in him worrying for them. Jihyuk was angry that a bunny was being bullied in his territory, and no one bothered to stop it. He reminded them he didn't do anything about it because Eunkyum didn't want any fuss. But from then on, anyone who goes out of line will be punished. Well, that was enough for Eunkyum. And so, he again tried to convince Jihyuk that he was okay, especially since they promised not to bother him anymore. The Jihyuk's face made Mr. Ha and Mr. Park realize what the natural hierarchy of their village looks like. Once, when the 4 of them are walking in the village, they see a group of children looking at Jihyuk as if he's some hero. They voiced their jealousy of Yuna for being able to live with a tiger. When they asked if all tigers have small ears, Jihyuk explained that the smaller the ears, the stronger that individual is. And so, the attention was thrown to Eunkyum, who had the smallest ears among the villagers and somehow started wanting to have ears like him someday. Eunkyum now sells not just carrots in his spot in the market, as he has grown other varieties of fruits as well. When Hyunsu came over to congratulate him on his booming business, Eunkyum offered him some fresh apples, which he gratefully received. Hyunsu then started commenting about how the other villagers seemed to be lining up in Eunkyum's spot to get his carrots and apples. Moreover, the old fart Mr. Ha and the betard Mr. Park finally left the village alone. All are good, though, since at least now they have a tiger lord who's said to be the most muscular tiger. The said lord is now on his way to them with a sack on his shoulder. That was when Hyunsu decided it was his cue to leave. That action might seem rude to some, but Jihyuk felt smug about it. On one of their walks, Eunkyum and Jihyuk were talking about the plans that they wanted to do for the coming season. Although it was just Eunkyum deciding everything and Jihyuk just agreeing. And then Jihyuk once again brought up the babies that the two of them would have. And he wanted 2 baby tigers, 1 boy and 1 girl. Eunkyum at first laughed since Jihyuk was bringing it up again. And to humor him, Eunkyum pointed out that perhaps they'll have baby bunnies instead. And, of course, Jihyuk is okay with that. Seasons changed, and years passed by. Although it seemed unbelievable, some said they saw a tiger that looked like a bunny, and others claimed they saw a bunny that looked like a tiger. Whether they were real or just a play in the light, the important thing is that this story ends with a happy ending. And that's it. We're finally at the end of the end. And it's for real this time. Thank you for being with us. See you on the next recap.